After becoming famous, her ex-husband came to ask for reconciliation. One absurd night, one embryo, Wen Shuyi transformed from a despised girl of the Wen family into Mrs. Gu. She thought Gu Yuechen was her salvation, but she just fell into another abyss. For years of marriage, endless pain, she lost herself watching the gossips about her husband and his lover every day. When she got pregnant again, a word from Gu Yuechen hit her heart. Is this baby mine? Chapter 1, Clinging Relentlessly to Brother Yuechen. Miss Wen, the test results have confirmed that the fetus is stillborn. You need to prepare for an abortion as soon as possible to avoid any further harm to your body. The doctor's almost formal words rang in Wen Shuyi's mind, turning into shards of ice that pierced her heart directly. In the midst of the sharp pain, a bone-chilling cold spread throughout her limbs. She looked up at the cold, untouched meal on the table, took out her phone again, and hesitated as her fingers trembled while dialing a number. Unsurprisingly, no one answered. Wen Shuyi gripped her phone so hard her fingers turned white, and an ache seemed to pulse from her abdomen. Her vision blurred, a self-mocking smile playing on her lips. Today marked the 4th anniversary of her marriage to Gu Yuechen, but she had been struck by the devastating news that her child was dead in her womb. She had planned to tell him tonight, not asking for anything more, just a word of comfort. But until now, she had received nothing but silence in reply. Her throat felt constricted, as if there was a lump of cotton lodged there, making even the slightest sob feel like an effort. Wen Shuyi took a deep breath and, with a final flicker of hope, lifted her phone to dial again. Just then, multiple messages popped up on her screen. They were from Lu Shenran. No matter how shamelessly you cling to Brother Yuechen, on your anniversary, he's still spending it with me. Beneath the message, there were 7 or 8 photos. All of them showed intimate moments between her and Gu Yuechen, some of them with them embracing, others at dinner together, and a few that looked like they were about to kiss. The beautiful images of the handsome man and woman were almost blinding in their perfection. Wen Shuyi coughed violently, choking on the sharp air, and tears began to fall uncontrollably. After a long while, she finally mustered the strength to reply, "A well-known actress like you, clinging to a married man. Do you know what your fans would think if they found out?" Before waiting for a reply, she shut off her phone. She looked again at the cold meal on the table, giving a bitter laugh before heading to her room to sleep. That night, Wen Shuyi couldn't sleep well. In her dreams, the photos Lu Shenran had sent her kept reappearing, as if they were alive, endlessly tearing apart, growing larger, grinning menacingly as they closed in on her, wrapping around her. Wen Shuyi gasped for air, feeling suffocated, struggling instinctively. Her eyes snapped open, only to meet a pair of deep, abyss-like eyes. Moonlight spilled in from the side, outlining a cold, indifferent profile and the disdain in his eyes. Wen Shuyi froze, her mouth opening to speak. However, an unfamiliar sensation washed over her, and all her words became fragmented, echoing throughout the room, filling it with an eerie stillness. Her thoughts scattered for a moment before something struck her, and she instinctively began to struggle. "Stop, don't." Gu Yuechen was displeased with her resistance. His aura seemed to darken, like a storm cloud pressing down. "What are you playing at, pretending to be coy?" His mocking tone hit her like a hammer. Wen Shuyi's face turned pale. In a sudden impulse, she hoarsely asked, "Do you even remember what day it is today? Where did you go yesterday?" Gu Yuechen slowly rose, his clear eyes filled with mockery. "Do you really think that just because you're Mrs. Gu, you can pry into my whereabouts?" He parted his lips, his words cruel and sharp. "Since you're just a distraction, know your place." Wen Shuyi's pupils constricted as an unbearable pain gripped her heart. Staring at Gu Yuechen's frosty demeanor, her voice trembled. "I'm pregnant." At her words, Gu Yuechen's movement stalled for a moment before he let out a colder laugh. "Wen Shuyi, your period just ended. Are you seriously lying to me?" Wen Shuyi shook her head in pain. She wasn't lying. It was the time when she had lost the child after bleeding, unable to keep it. Gu Yuechen seemed oblivious to her suffering and added casually, "Besides, you were pregnant back then and still tried to seduce other men. Who knows if this child is even mine?" Boom. A thunderclap hit Wen Shuyi as her mind went blank. She unconsciously clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. So, in his eyes, she was nothing but worthless. Back then, when she was pregnant, her senior, Bai Yi, had invited her to meet him. Unexpectedly, he confessed his feelings for her. After being rejected, he lost control of his emotions and tried to force himself on her. In the struggle, Wen Shuyi had fallen and miscarried. Despite her explanations afterward, the Gu family insisted that it was her fault, and she was mocked and ridiculed. Gu Yuechen's relationship with her had plunged to an all-time low. Wen Shuyi had no choice but to accept it. But she never expected that, in his eyes, she would be seen as such a person. All her hopes and dreams were shattered in that moment. Tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Her voice was hoarse, like that of a ghost. Gu Yuechen, let us divorce. The man looked down on her, as if a god gazing at an ant. His eyes were filled with contempt and disgust. Divorce? Don't forget, the Wen family depends on the Gu family to survive. Are you sure you're willing to let go? Since Wen Shuyi married into the Gu family, the two families had started close cooperation. To be precise, the Wen family had been shamelessly relying on the Gu family, depending on the orders that leaked out from them to survive. Once the cooperation collapsed, the Wen family would be torn apart immediately. Wen Shuyi closed her eyes, no longer having the strength to fight back. It was a torture that lasted until dawn before it finally ended. Exhausted, she passed out from sheer fatigue. When she woke up again, it was the next morning. Wen Shuyi moved slightly, her body feeling as if it had been disassembled and reassembled, even moving her fingers felt like a struggle. She subconsciously looked to her side, and sure enough, no one was there. It was hard to tell whether she felt disappointed or relieved. She paused for a moment before getting out of bed. She still had work to do today. Wen Shuyi took leave from the company, packed her things, and headed to the hospital for an abortion. Miss Wen, did you come alone? No family members accompanying you? When the nurse asked this while she lay on the cold operating table, Wen Shuyi felt a momentary sense of confusion, the coldness seeming to seep through her skin into her blood. She bit her lip and nodded slowly. Perhaps sensing her change in expression, the nurse seemed to understand and did not ask further, starting to prepare for the procedure. As the anesthesia was slowly injected into her body, Wen Shuyi's consciousness began to fade, and just before she succumbed to the darkness, a single tear silently slid from her eye into her hair. Millimeter. Wen Shuyi groaned as she opened her eyes. The vast white ceiling came into view, the faint scent of disinfectant lingering in the air. She instinctively placed her hand over her abdomen. Though nothing seemed to have changed, she felt an emptiness, as if something inside her was missing. Wen Shuyi lay there in a daze until a noise from the door caught her attention. Miss Wen. A nurse entered, holding a lunchbox with a smile on her face. You haven't had dinner, right? I ordered an extra portion, just for you. She walked over and placed the lunchbox on the bed, her gaze filled with subtle pity. This woman had come alone for an abortion, and no one had come to visit her. Had it not been for the doctor's instructions, she might have gone without dinner. Wen Shuyi was taken aback but quickly adjusted her expression. Thank you. The nurse smiled and left. The room grew quiet again. Wen Shuyi had no appetite and placed the lunchbox aside. She picked up her phone and saw that, aside from work matters, there were no other messages. She didn't look further and drifted back to sleep. Sometime later, the loud ringing of her phone startled her. She was too drowsy to check who it was and picked up the phone absently. Out all night again, where have you been fooling around? The man's questioning voice came through. Those words instantly woke Wen Shuyi from her haze. She opened her eyes, staring at the ceiling, an unprecedented exhaustion weighing down on her, so heavy that she didn't even have the strength to speak. After a moment, she hung up the phone without a word. The dial tone sounded, and Gu Yuechen didn't expect the person on the other end to hang up on him. His brows furrowed, and anger rose within him. He threw the phone down forcefully. The assistant, observing his expression, cautiously approached and asked, Sir, should we check on Madame's whereabouts? Gu Yuechen's face remained cold as he spoke in a low, detached voice. Let her go to hell. The assistant fell silent, not daring to say more. After the abortion, Wen Shuyi was physically weak, and the doctor recommended that she stay in the hospital for a few days. She welcomed the time to catch her breath, so she delegated the remaining work and focused on recovering. The days passed in quiet monotony, until she received a call from Gu Yuechen on the 5th day. His voice was as cold as always. Wen Shuyi, your methods never cease to amaze me. You've gone missing to get grandma to pressure me, haven't you? Wen Shuyi was confused but quickly regained composure. What are you talking about? Gu Yuechen sneered, stop playing dumb. You've been missing for several days, and you're trying to get grandma to pressure me, right? As for having a child, don't even think about it in this lifetime. I'll give you half an hour. Get back to work at the company immediately. He hung up without giving her a chance to explain. Fortunately, Wen Shuyi had long been used to his behavior. After thinking for a moment, she understood what was happening. In this marriage, the only person who truly cared about them was Gu Yuechen's grandmother. During their coldest period, it was she who arranged for Wen Shuyi to work at the company as the PR director, hoping to improve their relationship. But even after all that, her hopes had never been realized. After Wen Shuyi joined the company, she spent most of her time handling the endless rumors between Gu Yuechen and Lu Xinran, and her heart had been hardened beyond repair. At this point, there seemed to be no point in continuing to hold on. With this thought, Wen Shuyi felt a sudden clarity. She didn't hesitate any longer. She completed the discharge procedure, found a divorce agreement online, made a few changes, and had it printed before taking it to the company. She first stopped by the PR department. Thankfully, there had been no major crises in the past few days. She quickly arranged for the upcoming tasks and headed toward the CEO's office on the top floor. Coincidentally, Gu Yuechen was in a morning meeting. Wen Shuyi waited for a while, but seeing that it wasn't ending anytime soon, she decided to leave. Wen Shuyi. As she was about to leave, the door to the CEO's office suddenly opened. A woman in a red dress, with chestnut hair and an arrogant demeanor, slowly walked out. She leaned against the door, her arms crossed, her eyes filled with disdain. What's the matter? Still shamelessly clinging to Brother Yuechen again? Chapter 2, Hurry and apologize to him. Even though she had long been accustomed to it, when Wen Shuyi saw her coming out of the office, her heart still uncontrollably tightened in her chest. The familiar pain spread like a stream of water, coursing through her whole body. Gu Yuechen's office was off limits to everyone except those who were familiar with him. Wen Shuyi quickly composed herself, her expression blank as she said, I am Gu Yuechen's legitimate wife. There's no problem with me coming to find him, but you, knowing your place, really have no shame. Lu Xinran's face shifted slightly, and she soon seemed to think of something, curling a strand of hair with her fingertips, slowly winding it. So what? The one Yuechen likes is me. That's much better than some woman who sits in an empty house like a resentful wife. Wen Shuyi said, looks like you're very proud of yourself. Lu Xinran tilted her head slightly, what else? She seemed to think she had the upper hand, with a smug expression hanging on the corners of her eyes and brows, until Wen Shuyi held up her phone in front of her. Lu Xinran's expression immediately shattered. Lu Xinran reached out to snatch the phone, you actually dared to record it. Wen Shuyi had been prepared and stepped back a little, pocketing the phone, and slowly said, for a top actress to take pride in meddling in someone else's marriage, this kind of news would definitely be explosive. Lu Xinran screamed, you dare? Wen Shuyi replied with a question, do you think I dare? Then she added, if you don't want to ruin your reputation, stay away from me. Otherwise, I'll hand this over to the media anytime. You? Lu Xinran was furious. Seeing Wen Shuyi's calm expression, jealousy and anger flashed in her eyes. She raised her hand as if to strike, but her peripheral vision caught a figure. Her eyes quickly shifted, and it was as if someone had pushed her, causing her to suddenly crash into the glass door behind her. With the sound of shattering glass, Lu Xinran fell onto the floor, blood pouring from her hand. She looked at Wen Shuyi in terror, Yuechen Ji. Before Wen Shuyi could react, a shadow from behind swept over her and roughly shoved her aside. Are you all right? Gu Yuechen crouched beside Lu Xinran, furrowing his brows as he checked her injury. Lu Xinran cradled her injured hand, tears welling up as she complained, Yuechen Ji, I was just advising Miss Wen not to enter your office without permission, and she suddenly got angry and pushed me down. My hand hurts so much. Gu Yuechen looked at her hand, then coldly glanced at Lu Xinran, apologize. Wen Shuyi lowered her eyes, her mind unusually calm. She looked at the intimate pair, and scoffed, why should I? She stood quietly in the hallway, sunlight shining beside her, casting a shadow over half her body, hiding all her emotions. Gu Yuechen looked at her, suddenly feeling like something was slipping out of his control. A strong unease surged within him, but he forcefully pushed it aside, his tone displeased, you pushed someone down, shouldn't you apologize? You'd better behave yourself, or I'll take action. Wen Shuyi found it absurd. She looked closely at Gu Yuechen, feeling as though this person before her was completely unfamiliar. All her previous hopes and fantasies shattered when he indiscriminately defended Lu Xinran. What was the point of holding on to a man so blind and heartless? When Shuyi silently curled her lips and spoke firmly, she stumbled back on her own. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not apologizing. Gu Yuechen's disgust deepened upon hearing this. You're denying the facts right in front of you. Wen Shuyi, you really disgust me. Lu Xinran saw them clash and pretended to be wronged, pulling on Gu Yuechen's arm. Yuechen Ji, I'm fine. Don't argue with Miss Wen. Gu Yuechen ordered again. I'll say it one last time. Apologize. Wen Shuyi lost patience for further arguments. Not possible, she paused and sneered. The two of you are a perfect match, one willing to act, the other willing to watch. Since that's the case, I wish you both a happy life together. She said as she handed the divorce papers to Gu Yuechen. Sign it. Gu Yuechen's eyes focused on the top lines of the paper, his pupils contracted, and a surge of anger erupted from who knows where. Lu Xinran, hearing this, secretly rejoiced, but on the surface, she feigned shock. Miss Wen, I'm just friends with Yuechen Ji. How could you misunderstand him like this? When Shuyi ignored her, her gaze fixed on Gu Yuechen. Hurry up and sign. After you sign, you can marry the woman you love. Isn't that good? Gu Yuechen came back to his senses, his tone impatient. What kind of game are you playing now? The person who once refused to divorce suddenly changed her tune. He was afraid she was trying to cause trouble again with this tactic. Again and again, she never learned to stop. Although Wen Shuyi had already mentally prepared to leave, his defensive attitude still stung her deeply. She clenched her fists, her voice a little hoarse. No, I just want to leave. She looked at Gu Yuechen, the corners of her lips lifting slightly. Because I don't like you anymore. I want to set myself free. The moment she said these words, it felt as though the heavy stone blocking her chest had suddenly vanished, and a sense of unprecedented relief spread throughout her body. Her brows and eyes gradually lifted, as if she truly was ready to step into a new life. Gu Yuechen's eyes were pained by her expression. An uncontrollable anger and frustration surged like a massive wave, crashing over him. He suddenly stood up, pulling Wen Shuyi towards the office. Let go. Who was she to say let go first? She had shamelessly used every means to cling to him, and now she hadn't even received his approval. She thought she could leave so easily. Did she think Gu Yuechen was someone you could come and go as you pleased? Lu Xinran quickly stood up and followed, calling out, Yuechen Ji, what's wrong? Don't get angry with Miss Wen, I. Before she could finish, Gu Yuechen coldly ordered, stop her. An assistant stepped forward, smiling as he blocked Lu Xinran's path. Wen Shuyi was roughly pulled into the office, and before she could steady herself, she was harshly thrown against the desk. Her lower back hit the corner of the table, and the sharp pain caused her to gasp. Gu Yuechen didn't seem to notice her reaction. In a few swift moves, he tore up the divorce papers and slapped them into her face. Divorce? You wish? He spat. The thin paper hit her face, almost like sharp blades, making Wen Shuyi flinch and close her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she asked, isn't this what you've always wanted? Gu Yuechen's face turned cold. Then it's not up to you to say when it ends. Wen Shuyi suddenly looked up, struggling to control her emotions. She moved closer to Gu Yuechen, demanding, what do you want? Keep me at home, endure your constant anger, suffer through your lover's occasional provocations, and afterward, I'll have to lower myself to please you. Her outburst didn't stir any response in Gu Yuechen. He coldly said, this is all your own doing. It felt as if her heart was pierced with steel needles, leaving small, secret wounds painful but undeniable. When Shuyi's eyes welled up, her lips losing their color. Truth be told, if she hadn't foolishly tried to take the position of Mrs. Gu 4 years ago, she wouldn't have ended up like this. But after 4 years of torment, even if she was guilty, it was time for her to atone. When Shuyi's voice was hoarse, since you don't want it, I'll go talk to Grandma. Wen Shuyi. Gu Yuechen's voice was icy as he pulled her back, slamming her onto the desk, ripping her clothes with a swift movement. Isn't he all you wanted, a child? Fine, I'll give it to you. Let us see what tricks you still have up your sleeve. There was no one outside the office, but the open door and the nearly transparent glass walls made Wen Shuyi feel an unbearable sense of shame, worse than being watched naked. Her eyes blurred with tears as she struggled with all her might. Gu Yuechen, let go of me! Wen Shuyi screamed. The exposed skin felt a chilling breeze, causing Wen Shuyi to panic like never before. All the love she once felt for him collapsed, turning into ridicule. Gu Yuechen ignored her resistance, forcibly restraining her hands and feet. As Wen Shuyi struggled, a rush of heat surged within him, making his impulse even stronger. He kept a cold expression, about to act, when Wen Shuyi finally felt something in her hand. She didn't have time to look closely, raising her hand and striking. Gu Yuechen raised his hand to block, and a sharp pain shot through his arm, blood pouring from the wound. He looked at the wound in shock, like a storm was about to break. Wen Shuyi realized she was holding a paper cutter. She didn't hesitate and pressed it to his neck, gritting her teeth. If you don't let me go, I'll die right here today. You dare threaten me? Gu Yuechen's voice was deathly cold. Yes. Wen Shuyi didn't flinch. Gu Yuechen looked down at her, and perhaps because of what had just happened, her eyes were slightly red, her face tear-streaked, looking like a frightened kitten. Cautious, determined, so different from the soft affection she had once shown. Gu Yuechen sensed this and an unfamiliar feeling flashed through him. He didn't probe further and punched the air near her ear, coldly saying, "Get out." Wen Shuyi looked at the bloodstain on the ground, her fingers trembling. She placed the cutter back on the desk and, as she passed Gu Yuechen, whispered, "I'll have Tang Xian come in and bandage it for you. Get out." Wen Shuyi didn't say another word and silently left the office. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Tang Xian walked in with a medical kit, his head lowered. "Sir, let me bandage your wound. Tell them to terminate all collaborations between the Gu family and the Wen family." Gu Yuechen stood with his back to the light, his features hidden in the shadows, exuding an air of coldness. Immediately. Now. Wen Shuyi wanted to fly away from him, but he set up a web of traps to make her kneel before him, begging to come back. Tang Xian, overwhelmed by his aura, immediately left. Wen Shuyi left the company and went straight home to pack her things. She had been married to Gu Yuechen for 4 years, but the things that truly belonged to her were few and far between. A single suitcase was enough to pack all her belongings. She dragged her suitcase into the living room, then looked back at the place she had lived in for 4 years, her emotions a mix of complexity. This place had witnessed countless moments of her breakdowns, disappointments, and hopes. Now that she was finally leaving, Wen Shuyi felt a hidden sense of relief. The phone suddenly rang. Wen Shuyi glanced at the caller ID. It wasn't surprising. She pressed the answer button, and immediately, a barrage of curses came through the line. "Wen Shuyi, what the hell were you thinking offending Gu Yuechen? He's now cutting off all collaborations with the Wen family. No matter what you've done, you'd better hurry up and apologize to him." Chapter 3. What grievance could there be in front of Mrs. Gu? Wen Huqing's attitude was strong and overbearing. Wen Shuyi paused in her breath, her long lashes casting a shadow over her eyes. She retorted, "Have you ever considered that maybe it's me who has been wronged, that he has been forcing me?" Wen Huqing didn't listen to a word she said and impatiently replied, "What grievance could you have in front of Mrs. Gu? Even if there is one, just drop your attitude and try to soothe him, that should work." Wen Shuyi felt as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over her. All her words stuck in her throat, like cotton, unable to go up or down, suffocating her insides with pain. "Go apologize to Gu Yuechen right now, and make him restore cooperation with the Wen family," Wen Huqing ordered. Wen Shuyi gritted her teeth, "No way, I have nothing to do with him anymore." Wen Huqing's face twisted with anger, "Stop spouting nonsense. If you still want to see your sickly little brother, then do as I say, or else." He didn't finish his sentence, but the threat was clear. The pressure in his voice suddenly intensified. Wen Shuyi even tasted a faint metallic taste in her mouth. She clenched her phone, feeling like the heart that had just escaped the cage was now shackled once again. Yes, she had been so eager to escape Gu Yuechen that she had forgotten her brother was still in Wen Huqing's grasp. But even now, there was no way for her to take him away. 4 years ago, her brother Wen Yuechen was diagnosed with sudden leukemia and required a huge sum for treatment. Wen Shuyi had pleaded with Wen Huqing, but he coldly refused, saying the disease wasn't worth spending money on. Later, with his stepmother's persuasion, he told Wen Shuyi that if she accompanied his business partners, he would pay for her brother's treatment. Wen Shuyi had no choice but to agree. That night, when she entered the private room and saw the older man who could be her father, she regretted it deeply. As she rushed out of the room, she ran into Gu Yuechen, and they ended up having a relationship, leading to a series of entanglements that followed. Wen Shuyi was lost in her painful memories, each word soaked in tears. "He's your son too, don't you have any humanity left? So what? If you want him to live, do as I say," Wen Huiqing coldly replied before hanging up, certain that Wen Shuyi would yield. The beeping tone of the phone shattered her last defense. R. She collapsed onto the ground, clutching her suitcase, tears pouring like a dam had broken. What had she done wrong? What mistake had she made to deserve this repeated humiliation? Was it because she hadn't followed the family's plan, or because she foolishly dreamed of reaching the pinnacle of success with Gu Yuechen? Her mind was spinning, nausea rising within her. Gripping the suitcase as if it were a last lifeline, she forced herself to her feet and staggered outside. Leave. Get out of here. Go far away. Driven by the thoughts in her head, Wen Shuyi stumbled forward, lost in a daze, not knowing where she was headed until the screeching sound of a car horn cut through the air. She turned in confusion, blinded by the bright headlights as the speeding car seemed to fill her vision. Fear crawled up her spine, and her scalp tingled. Her instincts told her to move, but her legs felt rooted to the ground, unable to move. Watch out! In the critical moment, a powerful force slammed into her, knocking her aside. Dizzy and disoriented, Wen Shuyi felt sharp pain in her limbs. Her mind cleared, and she looked up at the person who had saved her. The night sky was dark, and the dim streetlights flickered on one by one. The man sat against the light, his eyes shining like stars. When they met her gaze, he smiled slightly. "Long time no see," he said. Wen Shuyi instinctively recoiled, her eyes wide with shock and anger. "Bai Yi, what are you doing here? Don't come near me." Bai Yi's eyes darkened but quickly returned to their normal shade. He casually replied, "What's the matter? I'm your lifesaver. Not even a thank you." Wen Shuyi's expression turned cold. "I don't deserve such a life-saving grace from you." She spoke coldly and gritted her teeth against the pain in her limbs as she tried to stand up, dragging her suitcase, intending to leave. Bai Yi's face changed, and his casual demeanor faded. He pushed himself up, but pain shot through his leg. He staggered to his feet, disregarding his injury, and hurriedly reached for Wen Shuyi's wrist. "Don't go yet." A flash of images ran through Wen Shuyi's mind. The stomach that had just settled churned again, and she reflexively swung her arm away, shouting, "Get away!" Bai Yi lost his balance and fell backward. At the same time, several bodyguards rushed over. "Mr. Bai, are you all right? You're bleeding." When Shuyi heard their exclamations and looked down to see blood streaming from Bai Yi's limbs, his clothes soaked in crimson, a horrifying sight. The bodyguards tried to take him to their hospital, but Bai Yi, his eyes filled with anger, ordered, "Get away from me." He then looked at Wen Shuyi and, with an expression returning to normal, even smiled, "Give me a few minutes to talk." One of his subordinates pleaded, "Miss Wen, please, for Mr. Bai's sake, let him go to the hospital first." The situation froze. Wen Shuyi looked at the stubborn Bai Yi, then turned to leave. But when she saw his blooded appearance, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. After all, he had been injured saving her. She silently walked over to him, dragging her suitcase. Bai Yi understood her unspoken agreement, smiling faintly, and allowed the bodyguards to help him stand. Wen Shuyi remained silent, following him into the car. The car sped down the road, as though terrified that Bai Yi might need to meet with death any moment. What should have been a 30-minute drive was completed in just a few minutes. Bai Yi was rushed to the emergency room, and Wen Shuyi stopped at the door. "Come in," Bai Yi said, his gaze fixed on her as soon as she appeared. Wen Shuyi glanced at him, seeing 2 drops of blood fall by his feet. Yet, Bai Yi seemed to feel no pain, leaning against the doorframe, waving her over. Seeing her hesitation, he stood up as if to leave. "Fine, I'll come find you." Wen Shuyi sighed inwardly and walked forward. Once inside, Bai Yi reluctantly lay down on the hospital bed to wait for treatment. However, his eyes never left her, constantly scrutinizing her. "You've made yourself look like this." He looked at her thin frame, her clothes hanging loosely on her body, her face pale and unrecognizable. He had thought that Wen Shuyi, so focused on Gu Yuechen, would be living a life of luxury by now. Wen Shuyi looked at him indifferently. This doesn't concern you? Bai Yi ignored her reply, his gaze firm. Has he treated you badly? He recalled the recent online news. Is he getting close to that woman? Wen Shuyi's fingers tightened, but she chose to ignore his words. But Bai Yi's mind was quick, and he soon asked, you were just carrying a suitcase, looking like you didn't want to live. Did you two get divorced? The last 3 words hit Wen Shuyi like a thunderclap. She hadn't expected Bai Yi to figure it out so quickly. But it didn't matter. After all, Gu Yuechen's divorce would eventually be known in the circle. Wen Shuyi quickly calmed her expression and stayed silent. Bai Yi saw her reaction and became angry. He pulled himself up as if to confront Gu Yuechen, but his wounds made it difficult. Why did he divorce you? I'm going to confront him now. Isn't it because of you that I ended up like this? Wen Shuyi's voice was cold as she looked at him, her eyes filled with rejection. Bai Yi froze, his arrogant demeanor crumbling. He lowered his voice. Shuyi, I was wrong before. You can hit me or scold me. As long as you don't ignore me, at least give me a chance to make up for it. Wen Shuyi sneered. Why would I let Bai Yi apologize to me? When she had begged him to stop, he still tried to force himself on her, which ultimately caused her miscarriage. That debt couldn't be repaid. Bai Yi's face turned pale, either from blood loss or from Wen Shuyi's words. His hand clenched the edge of the bed, veins bulging. After the doctor treated his wounds, he stood up and backed away. Wen Shuyi glanced at his injuries before standing up. Since you're fine, I'll leave now. She turned to walk away. Wait. Bai Yi's voice stopped her. He struggled to get out of bed but was stopped by the bodyguards. Mr. Bai, you shouldn't move right now. Wen Shuyi turned and said, say what you need to say. Don't get out of bed. Bai Yi stopped struggling and lay back down, then handed her a script. This is a script I'm planning to shoot. I want you to play the second female lead. Wen Shuyi froze. I won T. You studied acting, didn't you? I remember your dream was to win the Triple Crown for Best Actress. Bai Yi interrupted her. By the way, Lu Xinran is also going for this role. At these words, Wen Shuyi fell silent. She stared at Bai Yi, her hands slowly curling into fists. Bai Yi smiled, certain she had been swayed. Take your time to think it over. If you want this opportunity, report to the set in 3 days. He added confidently, I believe with your talent, you'll definitely be the brightest star. Wen Shuyi was shaken, unable to easily reject him. After a long pause, she simply said, I'll think about it. The night deepened. Gu Yuechen returned home after work. When he opened the door, it was pitch black. He stood at the doorway, furrowing his brows. Usually, no matter how late he returned, the lights would be on. Had she forgotten to turn them on? He casually flipped the switch, and the warm yellow light filled the room. For some reason, he thought of what she had once said. This light color feels warm, making me feel relaxed, unlike those white lights that make me feel like I'm still at work. Her soft, smiling voice echoed in his mind, drowning out all his other thoughts. Gu Yuechen's expression darkened as the light suddenly felt too bright. He suppressed his impatience and walked inside, opening the bedroom door, but there was no sign of Wen Shuyi. He quickly approached the wardrobe, only to find her half of the space completely empty. Good. Fine. If you have the guts to leave, don't come back crying. Gu Yuechen smiled bitterly, his deep eyes like a bottomless abyss. He stared at the empty wardrobe for 2 seconds before slamming the door shut and leaving. Chapter 4 Acting PK. Film and Television City, the crew of The Ember of the Long Moon. Director Jing Cheng sat behind the monitor, holding a loudspeaker in his hand and shouting at the top of his voice, hurry up, props, are the props ready? And over there. He ordered everyone around, keeping his eyes on their movements and showing his dissatisfaction from time to time. He prepared for this drama for 3 years, during which he encountered various problems such as insufficient funds and difficulty in finding actors. He finally found an investor willing to pay, and Jing Cheng was so excited that he wanted to live on the set every day to shoot the drama. The only drawback is that the investors like to randomly stuff people into the job. Jing Cheng glanced at the dressing room and was secretly worried. The girl was pretty, but he didn't know how good her acting skills were. The investors were so protective of him that they even waived his audition, which made him so angry that he almost jumped up and down. In this busy atmosphere, a group of people who arrived late seemed particularly leisurely. Lu Xinran was wearing all branded clothes and sunglasses, with his arms folded and his chin slightly raised, revealing his obvious arrogance. The assistant beside her ran to Jing Cheng and said with a smile, "Director, we are here, Xinran, what do you think of the second female role?" Although it was just a question, his tone made it clear that this role would definitely be given to Lu Xinran. After all, she is a movie queen with a huge fan base and the support of the GU group. As long as the crew has a common sense, they will definitely know how to make the choice. Jing Cheng was stunned when he saw them, then frowned and said, "Female second. We have already confirmed the candidate and are having a fitting inside." "What?" The assistant screamed and turned to look at Lu Xinran. Lu Xinran's expression changed slightly. She took off her sunglasses and turned to walk towards the dressing room. She wanted to see who would dare to snatch the role from her now that she had made the announcement. She pushed the door open with a fierce force, and the scene inside came into view. In the large dressing room, the lights were bright. A woman was sitting in front of the dressing mirror. When she heard the voice, she raised her eyes and met the woman's gaze outside the door. Her fair face is already made up, with distant mountain-like eyebrows, peach blossom eyes, and her hair is loosely tied up behind her. When she raises her eyes lazily, her charm and seductiveness cannot be concealed. "Wen Shuyi, how could it be you?" Lu Xinran shouted out of control. Wen Shuyi laughed and propped up her head with one hand. "Why can't it be me?" Lu Xinran looked unhappy. "How can you, who has never acted before, join the crew and play the second female lead? What tricks did you use to get in?" Wen Shuyi looked at her distorted expression in the mirror, with a provocative look between her eyebrows. "Guess." These two simple words instantly stimulated Lu Xinran to lose control of her emotions. She rushed towards Wen Shuyi and raised her hand to slap her. She couldn't tolerate that someone who had been bullied by her for many years could actually defeat her. When she was halfway down in the air, a hand reached out from the side and grabbed her tightly. Bai Yi put one hand in his pocket and walked in front of Wen Shuyi, his eyes half smiling but cold. "The dog that Gu Yuechen raised is starting to go crazy in front of me." Ever since Lu Xinran followed Gu Yuechen, she could get whatever she wanted, and everyone flattered her wherever she went. She couldn't remember the last time she was scolded by someone. When she heard it suddenly, she took 2 seconds to react, her face flushed with anger. "What did you say?" Bai Yi seemed a little disgusted. He let go of her wrist and took the tissue handed to him by the person next to him and wiped it carefully. "It seems that your ears are not working well. Why not cut them off?" He was joking, but his words were chilling. Lu Xinran's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly calmed down. She was Gu Yuechen's person, so even if Bai Yi really wanted to do something to her, he would have to think twice. She looked at Wen Shuyi with contempt. "I was wondering how you could act. It turns out you are trying to get close to the Bai family. I thought you loved brother Yuechen very much, but it turns out you are just fickle." Wen Shuyi's face darkened. "Keep your mouth shut." Lu Xinran sneered. "Why, you dare to do it yourself but you are afraid of what others say. Not only will I say it here, I will also expose on the internet that you, Wen Shuyi, climbed into the bed of the Bai family for acting." At least she still had some common sense and knew that she couldn't attack Bai Yi directly. After all, everyone in Shenzhen knows that Dong Jiyu and Shi Bai are equally powerful and can make Shenzhen tremble with just a stomp of their feet. Lu Xinran was secretly resentful. She didn't expect that Wen Shuyi was so resourceful. Just when she was about to divorce brother Yuechen, she turned around and hooked up with Bai Yi. Jing Cheng, who arrived a bit late, felt dizzy when he saw this. If this news really got out, his play would definitely be in trouble. He quickly put on a smiling face and advised Lu Xinran, "Ms. Lu, don't be impulsive. If this matter gets out of hand, it will not benefit anyone." Yes, let's talk it over nicely," the director echoed. Bai Yi smiled. "Acting is something that only those who are capable can do. Do we have to wait for you to act?" Lu Xinran pointed at Wen Shuyi, as if she had heard a huge joke. "A person who only knows how to revolve around men is better at acting than me." The mocking words were directed at Wen Shuyi without any concealment. Her expression darkened and she laughed at herself in her heart. Sure enough, what she thought was her hard work in the past few years was just a laughing stock in the eyes of others. Wen Shuyi put aside her thoughts, stood up and faced her. At least, I am a professional, not like you, who bought the movie with money. You? Lu Xinran's expression changed several times, and finally he paused and said, okay, since you all say she has the ability, let's just have an audition in front of everyone. If you really do perform better than me, then I will give up this role. Do you dare? She looked at Wen Shuyi provocatively. The director and screenwriter turned to Wen Shuyi, hoping that she would agree so that they could take the opportunity to see the acting skills of this woman who was forced in by President Bai. According to the usual practice, actors have to audition before joining the crew, but this Wen Shuyi was protected by Bai Yi as soon as she arrived, so they didn't have a chance to observe her at all. Not to mention Lu Xinran, even they themselves were unsure. Wen Shuyi curled her lips and nodded, of course I dare. The play, Chang Yu Jin, mainly tells the story of the daughter of the prime minister who was adopted as the emperor's daughter after her family was destroyed, married to a neighboring country as a princess, and then survived a difficult journey to become the queen. The second female character in the play is a noble concubine in the harem. Her family is powerful and she has a lot of say in the palace. What Wen Shuyi and Lu Xinran are going to compete in is a scene where the imperial concubine teaches a palace maid a lesson. Zheng Cheng couldn't wait to arrange the lighting and scenery. Just as he was about to ask who would go first, Lu Xinran stepped forward confidently and said to the director with a smile, I am also her senior. I will go first. She glanced at Wen Shuyi who was standing on the sidelines, and malicious intent emerged. Today, she not only wants to get the role of the second female lead, but also wants to make Wen Shuyi completely humiliate herself. Lu Xinran sat in the chair, waiting for the supporting actress who played the palace maid to bump into her. Her eyebrows were raised, and she slapped her with her backhand. Where did this idiot come from? He rushed around recklessly and didn't even know the rules. The maid covered her face and knelt on the ground, kowtowing frantically to her, Your Majesty, please forgive me. Your Majesty, please forgive me. Lu Xinran leaned back in his chair, sneered, and said coldly, Drag him away and sentence him to death. My queen. The scene ended with the screams of the palace maid. I don't know who applauded first, and the others followed suit. Lu Xinran smiled even more. She walked to Wen Shuyi and whispered, Next, it depends on your performance. Wen Shuyi automatically ignored her provocative words and walked into the venue. The prop arranged by Jing Cheng was the imperial concubine's couch. According to the script, imperial concubine Murongla was admiring flowers in the imperial garden when she was startled by a palace maid. While chatting and laughing, she took the maid's life. This scene is a key scene in shaping the character of the imperial concubine. When Shuyi recalled the plot and slowly lay down on the chaise longue, supporting her head with one hand, and gently waving a round fan that had appeared at some point in her free hand. While she was leisurely, a reckless little palace maid suddenly rushed up to her, and the fruit plate in her hand fell to the ground with a clang, making a harsh sound. The person on the chaise longue slowly opened her eyes, and with just a glance, invisible charm and pressure poured out. The maid knelt down in panic and kowtowed to her repeatedly, I accidentally disturbed your Majesty, please forgive me. When Shuyi looked at the person in front of her, picked up the round fan and tapped it against her forehead, then chuckled, look how panicked this girl is. If you don't know me, you would think I'm so cruel and merciless. Upon hearing this, the maid thought she could escape this disaster and said happily, Thank you, Majesty, for your mercy. Thank you, Majesty, for your mercy. When Shuyi sighed, propped herself up and sat up, frowning slightly, My dear, what I hate most is this kind of self-talk. First, you kneel down and beg for my forgiveness without any explanation, and now you are so self-righteous that you ask me to show mercy. TSK, this voice is so noisy. The palace maid's joy seemed to be poured with a bucket of cold water. Her face turned pale and she froze in place, not daring to move. Seeing this, Wen Shuyi giggled as if she saw some fun toy. She covered her lips with the fan and said, Look, it still looks better this way. She tilted her head, admiring the maid's desperate expression. The smile on her face grew wider, and her rosy lips moved slightly, finally deciding the maid's final destination. Drag him away, pull out his tongue, and throw him into the laundry. Murongla said this lightly and continued to lie down to rest. The palace maid was dragged away, screaming in agony. Murongla hummed a little tune and beat the rhythm with the round fan in his hand. Everyone was shocked by the scene before them. They seemed to feel the solemnity and bloodiness in the air, and they couldn't help but want to escape. When Shuyi opened her eyes, broke away from her role, stood up and faced the director, do you think this scene is okay? The sound of her voice pulled everyone out of the previous scene. Zheng Chang's eyes lit up, and he excitedly stood up to take pictures and cheered, "Great, great, you are the concubine I'm looking for. This is the imperial concubine who has her mother's family behind her and is honored in the harem. She can take people's lives while chatting and laughing. She is not like Lu Xinran, who shouts for war and killing, like a resentful woman who is not pitted. Wen Shuyi is not just a burden sent by the investors, she is clearly a powerful weapon." Zheng Cheng rushed to her and said, "Your acting skills are absolutely fine. I heard that you graduated from a professional school. Why didn't you start filming after graduation? Instead, you delayed it for so long." When Wen Shuyi heard the approval, a smile appeared between her eyebrows. After hearing the words, she was slightly distracted and said, "Before I took a DT, and now I want to get back on track." Upon hearing this, Zheng Cheng knew that there was probably some past event involved. He didn't ask further questions, but patted her shoulder with a smile. "Okay, it's good that you know how to do it properly. You are still young and capable, and it's never too late. Go take the final photos." From beginning to end, Zheng Cheng didn't even look at Lu Xinran. No one took advantage of the opportunity to add insult to injury, but this kind of disregard was like an invisible slap in her face, especially since she was the one who proposed this competition. Lu Xinran looked at Wen Shuyi with resentment in his eyes. She pulled out her cell phone, walked to the corner and made a call. Chapter 5, Terribly Poor Techniques. City A. Gu Yuechen was sitting in the branch's spacious and bright office, busy processing documents. When his cell phone rang, he casually pressed the answer button. "Hello. Brother Yuechen." There was a cry coming from the phone. Gu Yuechen paused, frowned, picked up the phone and asked, "What's wrong?" Lu Xinran said in a wronged voice, "I've been trying to get the role of the second female lead in a play recently. The director had agreed to it, but I just found out when I came here that they had changed the actress at the last minute." Gu Yuechen's frown deepened. Those people in the entertainment industry all knew that Lu Xinran had some relationship with him. Logically, they would give him some face. What's more, it was a plan that was originally made but changed at the last minute. He asked, "Who changed?" Lu Xinran paused, as if hesitating and worried about something, and finally said hesitantly, "The person they replaced was Miss Wen, and from what I heard, it seemed that they used the relationship of President Bai's." "What did you say?" Gu Yuechen's eyes suddenly became gloomy, as if there was a torrential rain that was about to pour down, and the biting cold made Lu Xinran shiver across the phone. But soon, she became happy. The angrier Gu Yuechen got, the more unlucky Wen Shuyi became. Lu Xinran continued to pretend to be in a dilemma. "Actually, if Miss Wen wants this role, I'll give it to her, but she's too close to the president of Bai Group, I'm a little worried." Gu Yuechen's face became increasingly worse, and he exuded a cold, murderous intent. He hung up the phone and threw the phone away. He was so angry that he laughed out loud. Good job. That woman really knew how to push his limits. He originally thought that if he gave her a few days, she would be able to figure out her mistakes on her own, but he didn't expect that she would turn around and give him such a big surprise. Dong dong. There was a knock on the door, and Tang Xian walked in from outside and reported in a low voice, "Mr. Jiu, Miss Wen's father has called many times to ask you to let the Wen family go, and now he is waiting for your reply. Look, do you want to stop?" As soon as he finished speaking, a raging rage burned in front of Tang Xian. Gu Yuechen's face was cold and his voice was icy. "Since you care so much about the Wen family, why don't you resign and report to them?" Tang Xian's heart trembled, realizing that he had run into trouble again. He thought for a moment, thinking that the only person who could make Gu Yuechen so emotional was Wen Shuyi, so he asked with the idea of making amends, "Do I need to check on Madam's whereabouts?" "Check? What are you investigating? Are you investigating how she interacted with that guy named Bai?" Gu Yuechen felt the rage in his heart boiling through his blood and all over his body. He gritted his teeth and said, "Go buy a plane ticket now and prepare to go back." He would go back now and let that woman know what to do and what not to do. "But if you keep talking nonsense, get out of here." Gu Yuechen left after saying this, and got up and left. Yes. Wen Shuyi filmed on the set until midnight and was so tired that she even had difficulty raising her hands. She quickly removed her makeup and was eager to return to the hotel to have a good rest. Bai Yi kept an eye on Wen Shuyi's movements, caught up with her in time, and asked with a smile, "Are you interested in having a midnight snack? Let's rehearse some acting while we're at it." Although Wen Shuyi has excellent acting skills, she lacks practical experience. During filming, she was often scolded by Jing Cheng. His suggestion was well-intentioned. But Wen Shuyi didn't have the heart to think about these things. "No, I want to go back and rest." As she spoke, her face was full of fatigue. Bai Yi also knew how much work she had today, so he raised his eyebrows slightly, but did not force her. "Okay then, just consider it as you owe me a meal today, and you have to find a chance to pay me back some other day. Something that I never agreed to turn into a debt." When Shuyi frowned and complained, "You don't do business at a loss." Bai Yichuan took it as a compliment, of course. The two talked as they walked to their hotel entrance. When Shuyi waved at him and walked towards the room with heavy steps. Her eyelids began to droop. She managed to return to the room with difficulty. As soon as she entered the room, a strong hand suddenly reached out from the darkness, covered her mouth and dragged her inside. When Shuyi was caught off guard and was frightened out of her wits. Her mind raced as she raised her knee to kick the opponent's fatal spot, but her action was predicted and her left foot was controlled by the opponent. In the blink of an eye, she was firmly subdued. When Shuyi's heart was pounding and she struggled desperately, but it was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree, it was useless. "With just this little trick, you dare to resist?" Just when she was about to despair, a familiar voice fell into her ears. When Shuyi was startled, and while she was distracted, the lights in the house came on, illuminating the face of the person who was suppressing her. This was a face that Zhang Wen Shuyi was familiar with to the core. His handsome features were as sharp as a sculpture, with deep eyes, a straight nose, and sharp and ostentatious contours. "It's Gu Yuechen." When Shuyi's heart, which had been hanging in the air, fell back to its original place. She relaxed, and then she became more angry. "Are you sick? Do you think it's fun to ambush people in the room in the middle of the night?" Gu Yuechen's already dull expression became even darker. His hand slowly moved to Wen Shuyi's neck, and he said without any emotion, "You are much braver now, and you are sharp-tongued." They even dare to point their fingers at him and curse him. It seems that they really think they can rest assured as long as they can get close to their Bai family. Wen Shuyi no longer had the idea of praising him, and her attitude was no longer as cautious as before. She chuckled and said, "After all, I don't plan to live my life by your face now. It probably won't be possible in the future. If Mr. Gu doesn't like it, he can sign the divorce as soon as possible and then marry a wife who suits him." Gu Yuechen's fingertips suddenly closed, and he approached Wen Shuyi. His tone was unusually calm. "Do you think that you can get rid of me by hugging Bai Yi's thigh? Have you ever thought about what your brother should do?" The air in Wen Shuyi's mind gradually became thinner, and her hazy consciousness was focused again because of these words. She was furious and her eyes were like knives. "What do you want to do?" Gu Yuechen said slowly, "Of course I am giving you the opportunity to make a choice. If you want him to be safe, then move him back the same way you moved away. Otherwise, all the consequences will depend on my mood." They have been married for so long, and this is the first time that Gu Yuechen has communicated with her so calmly. This was clearly the scene that Wen Shuyi had been looking forward to for a long time, but at this moment, she felt an endless chill rising in her heart. How could someone who could survive the dangerous situation like the Gu family be a good person? He just didn't take her seriously before, but now he suddenly takes her seriously for some reason. Can she still escape? Wen Shuyi felt powerless. She struggled for a long time before giving up and saying, "I can move back, but I hope to continue filming." Gu Yuechen sneered, "Why, you can't bear to part with that Bai guy and want to continue to seduce him?" "I didn't." Wen Shuyi retorted, trying to explain to him, "I just want to have my own career. Acting is something I have always liked." Gu Yuechen remained silent and did not respond. Wen Shuyi raised her hand and swore, "I promise, I am just filming here, and I will avoid any private contact with Bai Yi the rest of the time." As she spoke, she pursed her lips and said, "I beg you." For a moment, Wen Shuyi showed her usual careful and flattering appearance when she was in the Gu family. "I used to feel annoyed when looking at it, but now I find it somewhat pleasing to the eye." Gu Yuechen's eyes suddenly became dark. He loosened his hand and slowly placed it on the back of Wen Shuyi's neck, kneading it gently. "If you want to ask for help, you must have the attitude of asking for help." He curled his lips, "Please me." The color drained from Wen Shuyi's face. She seemed to see her dignity and face being torn off and thrown to the ground at this moment. The fingertips hanging by her side trembled slightly, and she was unable to react for a long time. Gu Yuechen leaned against the wall, waiting patiently. Time passed by minute. Wen Shuyi gritted her teeth and went forward to unbutton Gu Yuechen's collar. At the same time, she stood on tiptoe and kissed his thin lips in an unskilled manner. She had almost no experience in this area, and having come this far, she had no idea what to do next. Wen Shuyi raised her eyes and looked at Gu Yuechen's expression. He just stood there, looking down at his own movements calmly, without any sign of emotion, and the corners of his lips slightly raised, seemed to carry a hint of mockery. Wen Shuyi's eyelashes trembled, and she clumsily outlined the curve of his lips. The hand on his chest slid down his shirt and landed on his abdomen. In a panic, her fingertips accidentally brushed across Gu Yuechen's waist, and the man's body seemed to tense up for a moment. Wen Shuyi paused and was about to speak when she was suddenly picked up and thrown onto the bed. She looked at Gu Yuechen's half-bright and half-dark face beside the bed, closed her eyes resignedly and waited. The man quickly leaned over and bullied her. His magnetic and steady voice rang mockingly in her ears, "Your skills are terrible. Go back and learn more." What he didn't say was that even though Wen Shuyi had no strategy just now, she still ignited a fire in him again and again, to the point that he couldn't bear to see her continue to be embarrassed. Wen Shuyi said nothing and allowed herself to be possessed forcefully and domineeringly. The moonlight swayed outside the window, casting a patch of moonlight inside the house. A lingering love affair that ended without knowing when. Gu Yuechen still pulled away ruthlessly as usual, but this time with a satisfied look on his face. He said calmly, "I'll give you 3 days to move your things back." He gave a deadline. This means agreeing to let her continue filming. As for moving, it actually makes no difference whether it's sooner or later. Wen Shuyi thought about it and nodded in agreement. Gu Yuechen looked down at her with empty eyes, feeling a little uncomfortable in his heart. He hated the way she looked, as if everything she was doing now was forced. Even if it was true, she had to pretend to be willing to come. Gu Yuechen bent down, pinched Wen Shuyi's jaw, and warned in a calm voice, "When we meet again, you'd better not let me see you like this." Wen Shuyi felt a pang in her heart and found it a little ridiculous. Does she still have to act like she is grateful? Fortunately, Gu Yuechen didn't need her to answer for the time being, and left after he finished speaking. The room fell silent again. Wen Shuyi lay there in a daze for a long time before she slowly sat up, hugging the quilt. She looked out the window at the endless night, and seemed to hear her remaining pride breaking bit by bit. The emotions in my chest were swelling up endlessly: grievance, disgust, despair. All squeezed into tears. A breeze blew in from outside, blowing up the charming scent that had settled in the house. Wen Shuyi smelled it and her stomach churned wildly. She came to her senses and got up to pack her things. All the sheets and quilt covers need to be changed. Wen Shuyi continued to work numbly, trying to forget what had happened not long ago, until there was a knock on the door. Chapter 6 is trending. She paused for a long time and didn't move. Finally, she took a deep breath and turned to open the door. The one who came was Bai Yi. When Wen Shuyi discovered this, she heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. She asked in a low voice, "Is there something wrong?" Bai Yi brought the packed midnight snack to her and said with a smile, "After thinking it over, I decided to pay for your midnight snack. Crayfish, you used to like it very much. How about it, give me a favor?" As he spoke, his eyes swept across Wen Shuyi's collar calmly, and when he saw a faint red mark, he clenched his hand in his pocket into a fist. Thinking of the figure he had just seen leaving, jealousy and anger took root like seeds and quickly grew into towering trees. "No, I don't want to eat today." Wen Shuyi refused. Bai Yi advised, "It's my gift after all, can't you eat with me?" Wen Shuyi felt sore all over as if she had just finished running 800 meters. Even her feet were trembling slightly. She didn't want to say more, "I have no appetite." "Go back." His concern was blocked. After hesitating for a few moments, Bai Yi finally spoke up, "I know that bringing up that incident again will make you sad, but I still have to defend myself. I was not in a good mental state that day. Later I realized that I must have been drugged." Drugged? Hearing this, Wen Shuyi couldn't help but recall that Bai Yi had always been an elegant gentleman in the years she had known him. On the day he asked her out, he also expressed his blessings after knowing that she and Gu Yuechen were getting married. But after drinking, he rushed over like a madman. Seeing that she was in pain, Bai Yi felt very apologetic. He regretted it for a long time after the incident and kept thinking about how to make it up to Wen Shuyi. Then we're even. Don't bother me anymore. Wen Shuyi came back to her senses and her face became calm. Bai Yi put down his midnight snack, endured it again, and asked, "Are you okay? I see that you look a little unwell." "I'm fine, I just want to rest." Wen Shuyi shook her head and tried to close the door. "Let's talk about it tomorrow. It's so late now, and if someone sees us, it's easy to misunderstand." The last sentence was like a spark falling into an oil barrel, directly igniting all the emotions in Bai Yi's heart. He grabbed the handle and pushed it in violently, approaching Wen Shuyi and said uncontrollably, "It's easy to misunderstand with me, but what about with Gu Yuechen? Don't you have anything to do with him?" Wen Shuyi's body hit the wall heavily, and the severe pain and fatigue almost made her unable to hold on. She gasped and gritted her teeth and said, "This is between him and me. It has nothing to do with you." Bai Yi felt a little guilty when he saw her reaction. Before he could even say an apology, Wen Shuyi's words made him completely lose his mind. "It doesn't matter. Wen Shuyi, do you like to humiliate yourself? Do you have to stay with a man who is constantly involved in gossips?" he asked angrily. Wen Shuyi felt like a balloon, with people constantly inflating her, first Gu Yuechen and then Bai Yi. Seeing that she was on the verge of reaching her limit, his question turned into a fine needle and directly pierced her. Wen Shuyi pushed Bai Yi away with her backhand, her eyes red. "Do you think I want to? Do I want to? What can I do? I want him to be safe and sound, so I have to shamelessly stick to him again. You are the high and mighty Mr. Bai, who am I? Even if I hate you and don't want to see you again, don't I have to let you get close to me?" Bai Yi staggered back, and after hearing her words, he suddenly grasped the key point. He came back to his senses, grabbed Wen Shuyi's shoulders, and said repeatedly, "You said you want him to be safe. Who is he? Tell me, I can help you." The Bai family and the Gu family each hold half of the power in Shenzhen City. Gu Yuechen has connections everywhere, so he is no worse than the others. If, as Wen Shuyi said, Gu Yuechen had something on her, then as long as we find a way to resolve it, we can get her out of this completely. After Wen Shuyi vented her emotions, she had a splitting headache. In a daze, she heard Bai Yi's words, which were like catching a ray of light in the darkness. Seeing that she didn't say anything, Bai Yi frowned. "If you don't want to say it, forget it. I won't force you, but I will investigate this matter. I'll help you, Shuyi." Bai Yi looked at her seriously. "I don't want you to be so sad." Wen Shuyi closed her eyes in pain. "My brother has leukemia and is currently receiving treatment abroad. Gu Yuechen knows where he is. If I don't want him to get into trouble, I have to listen to him." Bai Yi's expression was sarcastic. "He really does use any means necessary." Wen Shuyi smiled bitterly. After all, it was all her own fault. If she had not overestimated her own abilities and provoked him, she would not have ended up like this. She looked at Bai Yi with hope. "Can you help me bring my brother back?" "Don't worry, I'll have someone bring your brother back right away." Hearing the promise, Wen Shuyi's eyes moistened. She leaned against the wall weakly and said softly, "I have nothing to thank you for right now, but if you need anything, just ask, as long as I can do it." Bai Yi's heart moved. However, Wen Shuyi seemed to sense his thoughts and continued, "Of course, there are some things that you and I know are impossible, so let's not mention them." Bai Yi gritted his teeth and laughed at her angrily. "You really don't give me any hope at all, you ungrateful little bastard." Wen Shuyi smiled. "This is obviously to prevent you from doing useless work." Bai Yi was so angry that his chest heaved. He wanted to pull her over to see if she had any heart. In the end, facing her determined look, he gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, you have principles." He stuffed the bag in his hand into Wen Shuyi's arms and said, "I'm leaving now. You can eat it yourself." Wen Shuyi was forced to accept it. She helplessly watched Bai Yi's figure disappear at the end of the corridor. "Never mind, just consider it as a free midnight snack." Gu Yuechen came quickly and left even faster, without revealing his whereabouts throughout the whole process. Lu Shenran secretly waited for a whole day, but there was no movement. She was so angry that she threw her phone away at home, walked back and forth a few times, turned her head and asked the assistant behind her, "Are you sure the crew doesn't want to replace them?" The assistant huddled in a corner, trying to reduce his presence. Well, it is said that filming has already started over there. Lu Xinran's eyes darkened. It seems that it is useless to just squeeze Wen Shuyi away. As long as Brother Yu Chen still has a place for her in his heart, it is enough for her to live a comfortable life. She had to find a way to make that woman completely disgusted. Lu Xinran dug her nails into her palms. After thinking for a moment, she said coldly, "Call the crew. I want to play the third female role. Also, ask Sister Zhang to post this on the internet." Sister Zhang is Lu Xinran's agent and has been with her since she entered the entertainment industry. The assistant understood that she was most likely going to take action against Wen Shuyi. She nodded. Okay. After the call was made, the company sent the contract with the crew within just half an hour. At the same time, Lu Xinran posted a status on Weibo. "I am very happy to be able to participate in the play Chang Yu Jin. I originally wanted to break through myself and try the role of a concubine, but it's a pity that I came too late. Please look forward to my performance." As soon as the dynamic post is published, there are immediate comments from fans. "Oh my god, do you really want to play the role of a concubine? I think you are very suitable for the role. Who stole the role of our sister? Is there anyone more suitable than her? I just watched it, the actress who played the role of the imperial concubine is a newcomer." When the comments had almost fermented, the press releases that Sister Zhang had arranged in advance began to be sent out in an overwhelming manner. The content was similar, all implying that the crew originally wanted LV Xinran to play the second female role, but because the newcomer who played the imperial concubine was too powerful, she snatched the role away. For a time, both Lu Xinran's fans and ordinary people were extremely disgusted with the person who played the imperial concubine. They wanted to flock to Wen Shuyi's Weibo to curse her, but they found that she had not registered, so they all ran to the Weibo of the Chang Yu Jin crew to start their microphones. What kind of fool can play the role of a concubine? Is she worthy? It's good to be rich and powerful, grab the role if you want, fire this woman immediately, otherwise we will boycott this drama. Yes, let her go. There was a bloody storm outside, but Wen Shuyi was completely unaware of it. She knew she had no practical experience, so after filming she would sit on the sidelines and watch other people's performances, and in her free time she would sit nearby and memorize lines from the script. Jing Cheng was even more satisfied when he saw her serious look. When he saw the trending search on Weibo, he was so angry that he threw the script and yelled, "Who the hell posted this? Hurry up and find a way to clarify this for me. Also, don't let Wen Shuyi know. How can I film if my mentality is affected when I look back?" He had a bad temper and never went back on his word, so naturally, the other people in the crew didn't dare to say anything to Wen Shuyi, but they couldn't help but take a few more glances at her when they passed by her. Wen Shuyi felt strange and took the initiative to stop the staff passing by and asked, "Excuse me, is there something wrong with me?" The field manager was startled and glanced at Jing Cheng secretly. After meeting his sinister gaze, he quickly smiled and said, "No, there is nothing wrong with you." Wen Shuyi frowned, "Then why are you all looking at me?" The staff tried their best to remain calm. We thought you were serious, so we were a little curious and took a few more glances. Are you okay? Don't worry. After he said that, he slipped away as if greased. Wen Shuyi frowned, still feeling something was wrong. But before she had time to think about it, she was called by Jing Cheng to shoot the next scene. Wen Shuyi fixed her makeup and hair and was about to walk to the set when she suddenly heard a voice called, "Bitch." Then something flew through the air and hit her on the head. A sticky liquid slid down her forehead, spreading along with a fishy smell. Wen Shuyi's mind went blank for 2 seconds. When she reacted and looked in the direction of the sound, she saw a dozen men and women pushing aside the poles blocking the road and rushing towards this side. Their faces were grim and they were filled with indignation. "Who do you think you are? You dare to snatch roles from us, Xinran? Bitch, you're worthy of relying on unspoken rules to snatch roles. Beat her to death and get her out of the crew." A sharp and piercing sound cut through the air above the crew. They held all kinds of rotten eggs and vegetable leaves in their hands and threw them at Wen Shuyi. Some were so emotional that they even wanted to push her. Wen Shuyi sensed the crisis and stepped back subconsciously. However, she was wearing a costume, and their wide sleeves and skirt became a burden at the critical moment. Someone was quick to grab her clothes, took out a knife from his pocket and stabbed her. Chapter 7 Get Back. Wen Shuyi couldn't break free and could only watch the cold knife grow infinitely bigger in her pupils. Her face turned pale and she stepped back frantically. At the critical moment, a figure suddenly rushed over from the side and raised his hand to block the blade, but he was half a step too late. The knife pierced his arm, leaving scarlet blood. Wen Shuyi raised her eyes and saw Bai Yi standing in front of her with a stern expression. When he saw her line of sight, his cold eyes softened slightly. "It's okay, close your eyes." "What are you doing?" Zheng Cheng shouted angrily, and ran over with other men on the set to stop them. More than a dozen people took action at the same time and quickly separated the crazy fans. Zheng Cheng glanced over here and ordered, "I'll take care of this, you guys go to the hospital and bandage it." Wen Shuyi's hands and feet were cold, and she had not yet recovered from the incident. She pinched her thigh and tried to calm herself down. "Let's go to the hospital first." Bai Yi casually took out a handkerchief from his pocket and covered the wound. He even had the leisure to joke with her, "I have saved your life today. Would you consider repaying me with your body?" Wen Shuyi's face was solemn, and a cold look flashed across her face as she glanced at the fans who were surrounded not far away. The incident happened suddenly just now and she had no chance to think. Now that she thinks about it carefully, she knows that this is most likely the result of Lu Xinran instigating the situation behind the scenes. "I really can't wait." Bai Yi didn't get a response. Looking at her solemn expression, he smiled slightly and said seriously, "Do you want me to help you?" He had already seen the Weibo post and knew what was going on without having to guess. "No, I know what I am doing." Wen Shuyi refused. She already owed Bai Yi a favor by asking him to help her find her brother's whereabouts. Add to that the protection he just gave her, and she was afraid that if she continued to owe him more, she would not be able to repay him. Bai Yi's eyes dimmed and he said nothing more. In the corner, Lu Xinran put away his phone, looked at the photos he had just taken, and smiled with satisfaction. Originally, she just wanted to teach Wen Shuyi a lesson, but she didn't expect Bai Yi to suddenly show up and give her a good opportunity. She wanted to see what Wen Shuyi would do this time. Lu Xinran found Gu Yuechen's WeChat and sent him a few photos. Wen Shuyi took Bai Yi to the hospital. After examination, they were told that the wound was too deep and required stitches. Bai Yi sat beside the bed, looking at Wen Shuyi. After a while, he said quietly, "I think that as the person who was rescued, I should show some appreciation." Wen Shuyi was silent for a moment, then said, "No problem, I'll ask the doctor to give you more anesthesia, and I'll reimburse all the treatment costs." After she finished speaking, she stepped back half a step to make room for the doctor. This stubborn look made Bai Yi angry again. If he had known that this woman was so heartless, he should have just watched the show from the side. It would have been better than being injured and having to go to the hospital for stitches. The doctor listened to their interaction and was a little amused. "Don't worry, young man. The pain will go away after the anesthetic takes effect." Bai Yi looked unhappy. "It doesn't hurt, but I feel a little disappointed. I did something righteous but some people didn't show any gratitude." Wen Shuyi retorted, "Don't talk nonsense, I have already accompanied you here, and now." Before she finished speaking, the phone in her pocket suddenly rang. She took it out and saw that it was Gu Yuechen calling. Wen Shuyi's heart sank. She glanced at Bai Yi, turned around and walked outside to answer the phone. The man's deep voice came over along the current, "Where is it?" Her fair fingers clenched together, and a feeling of powerlessness arose spontaneously. Wen Shuyi gave Bai Yi an apologetic look and slowly closed the door of the room. Still on the set. As if hearing some extremely funny joke, a man's low and sarcastic laughter came from the other end, which was so cold that it made people feel like falling into an ice cave. "Wen Shuyi, do you really think you are good at acting? Why, do you really want to stay in the crew? Or do you want to please your good lover?" The man's words were full of malice. Even though Wen Shuyi had developed a strong character, she was still deeply hurt by the word mistress. Her thoughts involuntarily went back to the day of the miscarriage, the strong liquor, the man with red eyes who was as forceful as a beast, and the blood all over the ground. These scenes were like a thorn that pierced into the softest part of her heart. "It's not what you think at all." Wen Shuyi was terribly cold all over, shaking, and screaming uncontrollably. Then, as if she realized what she had done, she gritted her teeth and lay on the ground. "I'm sorry. I lost my composure just now. You know, I don't have any other ideas at all." She explained palely, and her whole body went limp as if it had been drained of energy. Gu Yuechen's voice on the other end was silent for a moment, and then he said coldly, "Don't forget what you promised. Want to prove it to me? Then get back here." The call was hung up mercilessly, leaving only the beep notification tone. Wen Shuyi supported her entire body against the wall, gasping for breath. At this moment, she was like a fish that had fallen onto the shore and was about to suffocate. The invisible shackles made it difficult for her to breathe. You can't disobey him. You can't disobey him. Wen Shuyi thought sadly that Bai Yi had no accurate news about her brother yet, and she couldn't disobey Gu Yuechen at this critical moment. But why at this time? Wen Shuyi's eyes were red, and she bit her lips tightly. She finally had a little career improvement, but she still had to endure being called upon and dismissed like this. Shuyi. After a while, the door suddenly opened, and the faint light from inside shone on Wen Shuyi. She hurriedly turned her face away, adjusted her state, and forced a smile. Why did you come out? Didn't I tell you to wait for me inside? Bai Yi was silent for a while, his fists hanging below his body clenched and unclenched. He took a step forward, and feeling the man's hot breath, Wen Shuyi stepped back repeatedly. Did he call you again to bully you and force you to do something you didn't want to do? Bai Yi's face was full of heartache. The hand that he stretched out to hold her hair froze in place, and then drooped down dejectedly. No. He raised his voice and denied it flatly, it's not him. I just received a call from home about my brother's condition. She didn't say the rest of the words, but Bai Yi lowered his head in guilt. Sorry, Shuyi, I will definitely rescue you two siblings as soon as possible, please give me some time, okay? Thank you, Bai Yi. Wen Shuyi smiled, which made Bai Yi dazed. But I have to go back now. Things at home are rather complicated and cannot be explained in just a few words. So I'm sorry, I will be back before the crew starts filming. Wen Shuyi gave an apologetic smile, clutching the phone tightly and walked away. She absolutely could not show any sign of weakness in front of Bai Yi. She walked away in a hurry, but she didn't know that after she left, a sinister expression appeared on Bai Yi's handsome face. Gu Yuechen. These three words were squeezed out from between his teeth, filled with deep hatred. So, director, I'm sorry, I have to go back, but please rest assured, I will be back before the next scene. Wen Shuyi half bent over with guilt and submitted her leave application. Director Zheng, who was sitting at the other end of the desk, glanced at the black and white words on the table and felt dissatisfied. The newly hired actress was acting like a big shot and skipping work before they had even filmed 2 scenes. If it were anyone else, they would have been scolded to death by him, but considering Bai Yi behind her, Director Zheng still maintained his proper manners. Okay, you go first. However, the shooting schedule of our drama is very tight, so you must hurry back. Otherwise, if something unexpected happens, it will be something that you and I cannot afford. Zheng Cheng hinted at something, but Wen Shuyi, who was in a hurry to catch her flight, did not think about it and just kept thanking him. With a mutter, Zheng Chenglong signed his name in an elegant manner, and the next second the man couldn't wait to leave with the document. With a cold snort, Zheng Cheng slammed himself down on the chair, cursing in his heart. New actors dare to neglect their work like this, which shows that the entertainment industry is really getting worse with each generation. Ding dong, the doorbell rang again. Zheng Cheng mistakenly thought that she had dropped something. He suddenly became angry and stood up from the chair. The sexy woman in front of him stunned him. Why is it you? Why not me? Lu Shenran teased. She was wearing a black halter dress, with straight hair and red lips. She smiled boldly and charmingly. At this moment, she sat opposite him in a familiar manner and raised her eyebrows at him. The anger in his heart subsided by 3 points. Zheng Cheng smiled awkwardly and poured a cup of tea for Lu Shenran, complimenting her. If I had known that Ying Hu was coming, I would have changed the tea. Has the big star just finished work at this time? Zheng Cheng glanced at his watch and said carefully. The person in front of him was someone he couldn't afford to offend. Lu Shenran enjoyed Zheng Cheng's preferential treatment. He raised his chin and said bluntly, Director Zheng, I'll just say what I want to say. The new actor is young after all. Although she performed well, she inevitably has no practical experience. If their whole crew is forced to run away because of her, it will be a loss. Why don't you give her fewer scenes? This way, you can explain to the fans and also speed up the filming schedule. She had already informed the director to give her more scenes. As long as she could convince Zheng Cheng, even if she didn't play the second female lead, she would not be outdone by Wen Shuyi. No. Zheng Cheng simply refused and his face changed. When it comes to the structural changes of the play, Jing Cheng has always been very strict and will never change the rules arbitrarily for a certain role. You? Lu Xinran was furious. On the other hand, Wen Shuyi was completely unaware of this matter. Sitting in the economy class, Wen Shuyi was covered with a blanket, feeling physically and mentally exhausted about what was going to happen next. I closed my eyes and took a nap for a while. My mind was full of Gu Yuechen's sinister expression. When I woke up again, the plane had landed safely. Wen Shuyi got off the plane with the crowd, but saw butler Jiyu, who had been waiting in the airport lobby for a long time. When he saw her coming, he bowed deeply. Let's go. Wen Shuyi's voice was weak. Gu Yuechen had been a constant presence in her life, even controlling the means of transportation she took. Fortunately, the Jiyu family was well trained and didn't say anything. Wen Shuyi sat in the back of the extended version of Lincoln. The scenery in front of her flew by quickly. She looked a little dazed. When she came to her senses, she had arrived at the door of the Jiyu family mansion. The door in front of her was magnificent. As long as she gave a glance, someone would open the door for her. Behind the door was Gu Yuechen. Wen Shuyi's hands were covered with sweat. Just a few days of freedom had made her want more. Now, she didn't know how to treat Gu Yuechen. Chapter 8 Rage. Open the door. Wen Shuyi heard her own dry voice. After receiving the instructions, the doorman helped her open the door, and darkness swallowed her in an instant. There was no one in the room. Gu Yuechen was not there at all. Wen Shuyi breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time felt a little disappointed. That's right, considering Gu Yuechen's personality, he didn't really want to see me at all. He was just enjoying the process of torturing himself, and every step he took was just to make me compromise. Holding the suitcase tightly, Wen Shuyi dejectedly turned on the lights in the villa, looked at the familiar place, and smiled helplessly. I was the one who desperately escaped half a month ago, and now I am the one who returns in disgrace. Fate really played a big joke on me. By this time, the nanny had already gone to bed. Wen Shuyi carried her suitcase back to her room on the third floor, put the things she had taken out back in their original places, and then collapsed on the bed. She has been nervous these days and really needs a good sleep. On the other side, Gu Yuechen sat in front of his desk, typing on the keyboard. Opposite him, the housekeeper bent over, reporting Wen Shuyi's schedule for the day. The master's wife has returned. Do you want to go see her? Look at her. The knocking action paused. Gu Yuechen sneered, not caring, she is a vain person. In order to keep people, she lied about being pregnant. But you're right. I really need to go back and take a good look at her. After all, that old fox of the Wen family is very annoying. The butler lowered his head deeply, pretending that he heard nothing. After closing the computer in front of him, Gu Yuechen remained calm, with a hint of a cold smile on his handsome and sharp face. Prepare the car and go back to see Mrs. Jiyu. He bit the last few words very hard, and butler Jiyu agreed and left. Gu Yuechen's eyes stayed in mid-air, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Wen Shuyi was awakened by the cold touch on her neck and shoulders. She was in a nightmare at that time. A slippery snake was wrapped around her neck like a maggot attached to her bones. Wen Shuyi woke up from her sleep sweating profusely and met the man's cold eyes. The next second, the big hand was withdrawn from her neck and shoulders. Wen Shuyi shrank to the corner uncontrollably and looked at him vigilantly. Gu Yuechen, aren't you not coming back? This is my house, it's your turn to speak. Gu Yuechen calmly stated a fact. Wen Shuyi choked and mustered up the courage to argue, I have moved back as promised, so can you please not attack my brother and stop cooperating with Wen's, because if you do this, my brother's disease will not be cured. Pinching her delicate neck with one hand, Gu Yuechen's veins bulged. His bony knuckles were slightly curled, he gritted his teeth, and his deep and hoarse voice was loud and clear. Wen Shuyi, you are becoming more and more self-righteous now. You had an affair with a man outside behind my back, and you came back and shamelessly yelled at me. With the shameless attitude of your Wen family, what's the right? Grasping the man's wrists with both hands, Wen Shuyi's face flushed, Gu Yuechen. This is what you promised me. If you have the guts, kill me, or divorce me. Wen Shuyi's eyes were wide open, and there was no fear on her ferocious face. Her black and white almond-shaped eyes were full of bloodshot. She tapped her toes slightly, feeling the air in her throat being drained away bit by bit. Divorce? What do you think my Jiyu family is? Can you just leave whenever you want? Gu Yuechen sneered, kill you? For a stray dog like you? You are really worthless. Gu Yuechen abruptly withdrew his hand and wiped his hands with a tissue in disgust, as if he had just touched something unclean. Wen Shuyi's face turned blue. Am I so unbearable in his heart? Seeing Wen Shuyi in a trance, Gu Yuechen pinched her jaw with his fingertips. Grandma is coming back for dinner tonight, do you know what to do? Wen Shuyi was a little confused, how to do it. Don't say what you shouldn't say, otherwise, even gods can't save you. As the bedroom door was slammed shut, a trace of sadness flashed across Wen Shuyi's bright eyes. Sooner or later, one day I will stop loving you and stop being hurt by your words. Beep, 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 beep. Wen Shuyi coughed lightly, saw the caller ID on the screen, and picked up the call. The director's urging voice came from the other end of the phone. Hello? Shuyi, I have a scene near the evening and can't be delayed. Can you come back in time? Wen Shuyi hesitated and said apologetically, Director, I'm sorry, it may take me 2 days to go back. The director was silent for a few seconds, then said earnestly, Shuyi, I personally have high expectations for you. Your role is indispensable in the early stages, but you just joined the crew and you asked for leave. Wen Shuyi's heart tightened for a moment, and then she heard the director say, I can't make the decision on my own about the crew. If you can't make it back tonight, the investors will say they will look for other actors. Shuyi, please think about it carefully. After the call was hung up, Wen Shuyi suddenly felt that she was in dire straits. In front was Gu Yuechen's threat, and in the back was what she had always longed for. But she has been tolerant of Gu Yuechen time and time again. Is she going to sacrifice her favorite career this time just because she is afraid that Gu Yuechen will get angry? Is she going to live in torture and pain at the hands of Gu Yuechen for most of her life? No. I don't want to live like this. Wen Shuyi felt a surge of courage in her heart and prepared to talk to Gu Yuechen. She walked to the bedroom door and raised her hand to knock when Gu Yuechen's voice rang out from inside the door, Tang Xian, get someone to move Wen Yuechen away immediately. This voice made Wen Shuyi freeze in place. She originally wanted to hear where Gu Yuechen would move his brother, but the sound in the room suddenly stopped. Could it be that Bai Yi found his brother's whereabouts? A few days ago, she heard Bai Yi say that there would be news about her younger brother soon. That was great. Bai Yi is not a person who talks empty words. In this case, there is no need for Wen Shuyi to see Gu Yuechen, who hates her so much, again. She does not like to be tortured. Wen Shuyi's heart trembled slightly. She withdrew her hand that was about to knock on the door. Her eyes were full of determination. She put the suitcase in the corner and immediately bought a ticket back to the film and television base. 2 hours later, the plane landed steadily at the airport. Wen Shuyi saw the familiar Maybach from afar, and next to the car was Bai Yi's concerned face. How's it going? Did he give you any trouble? Wen Shuyi took 2 steps forward and subconsciously tightened her slightly open collar. But the red mark on the neck was shocking, and he still saw through it at a glance. His brows were furrowed, and a hint of sinisterness flashed across Bai Yi's gentle eyes. He tried to touch her, and Wen Shuyi subconsciously took a step back. What are you doing? Looking at her wary eyes, Bai Yi felt distressed. This injury was caused by him. Avoiding her burning gaze, Wen Shuyi shook her head slightly. No, I just bumped into it accidentally. You're lying. Staring at her calm eyes, Bai Yi's elegant gentleman image almost collapsed. Gu Yuechen is worse than a beast. Shuyi, why do you have to speak for him? Wen Shuyi paused and reached out to button her shirt to the top. But the red marks that were visible were like 2 water snakes biting each other, strangling her to the point of suffocation. Due to Bai Yiner's direct questioning, the atmosphere between them instantly dropped to freezing point. He calmed down his sudden overexcitement, took a deep breath, and said softly, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask. We already have a clue of your brother's whereabouts. I believe we will be able to find his exact location in no time. Please wait a moment. Wen Shuyi had never intended to be disrespectful to Bai Yi, but the emotions she brought back from Gu Yuechen were very heavy, and she couldn't get out of it for a while. Thank you, Bai Yi. As I said before, if you can successfully help me rescue my brother, I will definitely find a way to repay you in the future. Her eyelids slightly lifted, and she couldn't help but feel a soreness on the tip of her nose. No need. The most urgent task now is to quickly resolve the impact of public opinion. Since the public has already determined that you got the second female lead through my relationship, why not sign a contract with Bai's film company directly? Then the rumors about the two of us having an affair will be self-defeating. Bai Yi. Feeling guilty, Wen Shuyi hesitated to speak. Don't rush to refuse. I advise you to go back and think about it. The impact is huge at this moment, and this is the most effective method I can think of. Good. After responding softly, Wen Shuyi lowered her head helplessly. Bai Yi helped her open the car door first, and this scene happened to be captured accurately by the paparazzi. In the crew, Lu Xinran has spent a lot of money to collude with the screenwriter to add more scenes for himself. The original role of a pampered imperial concubine was turned into an unforgivable vicious cannon fodder by her. Doesn't Wen Shuyi claim to be a professionally trained actress? She just wants to make her role as a vicious female supporting actress popular among the people. Even if the drama is successfully broadcast in the future, she still cannot hold her head up in front of the audience. Director, it's been so long. Wen Shuyi hasn't come back yet. I think she doesn't take you seriously at all. There are so many people in the crew and the weather is so hot. Is she going to let everyone in the crew wait for her? A newcomer is so arrogant. What will happen if she becomes famous in the future? Hearing Lu Xinran's repeated instigation, the director's eyes gradually darkened. The crew had already been criticized for Wen Shuyi's incident, and now the filming process was delayed for no reason, which was really unacceptable. You, go call Wen Shuyi and see when she'll come back. Before the director finished speaking, Bai Yi and Wen Shuyi were seen walking towards the crew one after another. The woman's thin and bony figure was hidden in the dazzling sunlight, making people squint their eyes intentionally or unintentionally. Director, sorry to have kept you waiting. I'm back. Chapter 9 We Don't Divorce. Good. Without delay, Wen Shuyi glanced at Lu Xinran behind her, then quickly left with the assistant who was accompanying her. Bai Yi knew very well that the public opinion on the internet was caused by that woman. He bit his back teeth lightly and spoke calmly to the director who was resting nearby. Director, don't worry. I will find someone to investigate the public opinion. Some people try to use the power of fans to suppress newcomers. As an investor of the Chang Yu Jin crew, if I encounter this kind of cancer, I will definitely ask her to give the crew an explanation. Before he finished speaking, Bai Yi's sharp gaze was like an icy arrow that made Lu Xinran shudder. She shivered and turned her head away from his scrutinizing eyes. She greased her feet and left in a casual manner. In the empty lounge, Lu Xinran gritted her teeth and dialed Gu Yuechen's number. The man's voice sounded a little impatient. Listening to the woman's usual coquettish voice, he picked up the call with a little annoyance. What's wrong? On the other end of the phone, Lu Xinran felt extremely aggrieved, his smooth shoulders twitched constantly, and his weak voice was choked with sobs. Yuchen, you have to make the decision for me. Wen Shuyi hasn't divorced you yet, but she's already entangled with the guy named Bai. Relying on Bai Yi's support, she's been treating me with contempt. A fickle woman like this doesn't deserve the title of Madame Jiyu at all. Wen Shuyi is in the crew. Wasn't that woman at home? Why was she on the set? At this moment, a piece of fresh entertainment news suddenly popped up on the computer screen, with two familiar figures on it. Wen Shuyi's unspoken use of rules adds new information to her promotion. An actor Bai personally picks her up at the airport for a sweet ride. In the picture, Bai Yi helped him protect his head in an intimate manner, and the two looked at each other, chatting and laughing. Gu Yuechen laughed out of anger, and his phone fell to the ground. The loud thud frightened Tang Xian so much that he almost fainted. Wen Shuyi, you are so bold. You really think that you can easily draw a line between us just by getting close to the Bai family? It's just wishful thinking. Standing up, he took the suit on the back of the chair. Seeing Gu Yuechen about to leave, Tang Xian swallowed unconsciously. Mr. Gu, you still have to discuss cooperation with Mr. Huang tonight. This contract is very important, can't be postponed. His feet were nailed to the spot, and Tang Xian couldn't help but hold his breath just by looking at the man's back. Would you like me to call the madam? No need. Since she likes staying outside, she should never come back. Gu Yuechen's eyes were full of coldness. Tang Xian said in a trembling voice, Mr. Gu, are you saying that my wife is not allowed to enter the Gu family in the future? Gu Yuechen stopped and looked at Tang Xian meaningfully. I mean, she can't just come back to the Gu family whenever she wants. One day, I want her to beg me to come back to the Gu family. Use Wen Yueqing's phone to send a message to Wen Shuyi, saying that he misses his sister. Okay, I'll arrange it. Doesn't she want to act in a movie? Then give her a chance to hone her acting skills. Let Lu Shenran act well with her. Don't be too soft on the newbies. When Tang Xian heard this, he shuddered violently. This was clearly intended to make things difficult for Lu Shenran. In the crew, the actress was already respected, so how could she suffer any loss? Now that Mr. Jiyu had arranged this, Wen Shuyi would definitely have a hard time in the future. After arranging all this, Gu Yuechen left with a call of Xiao Han. Tang Xian finally realized that some people really should not be messed with, especially a man like Gu Yuechen. Tang Xian licked his lips, stumbled slightly, and followed in 2 steps at a time. Late at night, Gu family. It was originally planned that the whole family would have a lively dinner together, but in the end she was left alone to live her life in loneliness. On the huge dining table, the heat from dinner had already dissipated. Mrs. Liu stood to one side, looking at Liu Yuhua's lost face, and asked tentatively, "Madam, this dish is cold, do you want me to heat it up for you?" "No need." She sighed helplessly. Since this person didn't come, she didn't have much appetite to be left alone. What's going on between Xiao Chen and Shuyi recently? Are they having a quarrel again? For 4 whole years, their relationship had not improved, and Liu Yuhua was extremely worried about it. "Old madam, please don't blame me for being nosy. The young mistress has rarely come back these days. She and the young master seem to be getting a divorce." "Divorce? Nonsense. Did she really say that?" Liu Yuhua frowned and looked very ugly. "Well, I heard it with my own ears, it can't be false." His face became increasingly ugly, and Liu Yuhua covered his lips and coughed heavily several times. Seeing this, Sister Liu hurried forward to support her and asked with concern, "Are you okay? Help me find where Shuyi is. I want to go see her," she said weakly, patting Mrs. Liu's arm gently with her rough hands. "Yes, old lady." Film and television base. When Shuyi was sitting on a chair on the set reading the script with a slightly frown on her face. She had just vaguely heard a few actors talking about changing the script. How could she not know about such an important thing? At this time, Sister Liu helped Liu Yuhua walk into the studio. When she saw Wen Shuyi sitting not far away reading a script, looking thin, Liu Yuhua called out with some distress, "Xiaoyi." But when she saw Liu Yuhua appear on the set with kind eyes, gently calling her Xiaoyi and waving to her, her expression was so warm that when Shuyi froze in place for a moment, her eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, you're not feeling well. Why did you come so far to the film and television base?" When Shuyi greeted the director and hurried over to help Liu Yuhua into the lounge. As soon as the door was closed, Liu Yuhua grabbed Wen Shuyi's hand and said, "Xiaoyi, what happened between you and Yu Chen? You are both good kids, why did you?" As he spoke, Liu Yuhua's eyes became wet. As people get older, they can't bear to see their children and grandchildren breaking up and getting back together, and they are always worried about it. Her appearance also moved Mrs. Liu, who was standing beside her, and she hurried to comfort the old lady. "Madam, don't be sad for now, maybe the couple is just having a little temper, and it will be fine after a while. Just take these words for granted." Although Liu Yuhua is old, she can't be fooled by any random words. She patted the back of Wen Shuyi's hand and sighed. "For 4 years, I, as a grandmother, have always hoped that you would give me a great grandson, but after all my efforts, I ended up with a divorce, cough cough." Mrs. Liu frowned worriedly and hurriedly took out a cup of water for the old lady to drink. It can be heard that grandma is really hurt. Seeing the old lady so sad, Wen Shuyi patted her on the back and said, "Grandma, don't be angry first. Yu Chen and I may not be destined to be together. You youngsters always talk about fate, but I think they are all excuses. In my opinion, my grandson is just too inconsiderate. Xiaoyi, I will talk to him when I go back. Please don't divorce him." Liu Yuhua held Wen Shuyi's hand and shook it heavily. That action contained deep expectations. Sister Liu's eyes turned red, and she looked back at Wen Shuyi. "Madam, when the old lady heard that you were going to divorce, she dragged her sick body to see you. Please feel sorry for the old lady, please don't divorce your husband." Wen Shuyi was somewhat moved, but Gu Yuechen's side was not something she could decide. She always liked to say bad things about people behind their backs, so she forced a smile. "Grandma, I promise you, I will seriously consider this matter." Liu Yuhua heard that Wen Shuyi was badly hurt by her grandson. As an elder, she had no other choice but to persuade them to reconcile. So she looked at Wen Shuyi and said earnestly, Shuyi, Yuechen lost his mother when he was young and lacked the love of his father. He is cold by nature, but he is also a kind-hearted child at heart. Can you give him more? Mrs. Liu, have you accompanied Grandma to see a doctor? I think she is coughing quite badly. Wen Shuyi was a little worried. Sister Lin shook her head and looked at the old lady worriedly. Madam, I came to see you in a hurry. I haven't gone to the hospital yet. The family doctor prescribed some temporary medicine a few days ago, but it didn't work very well. What medicine? Wen Shuyi looked at Mrs. Liu and asked with concern. Mrs. Liu took out a bottle of medicine from her bag. Wen Shuyi took it and took a look. It was a common medicine for bronchodilating, relieving asthma and cough. Taking this kind of medicine without finding the cause of the disease may easily delay the treatment. She didn't dare to delay, picked up her bag from the table, supported the old lady and said, Grandma, there is a hospital here with good medical treatment skills. I will take you there to see the cause of the disease. Liu Yuhua froze in place and refused to leave. Wen Shuyi understood what she meant and said, Grandma, as long as Yuechen doesn't file for divorce, I won't take the initiative to file for divorce. Real. Grandma, when did the things I promised you ever change? Wen Shuyi responded seriously. Liu Yuhua finally relaxed her nerves, and her worries when she came were instantly relieved. She patted the back of Wen Shuyi's hand and said, I know you love Grandma. Don't worry, Grandma will talk to Yuechen when she goes back and ask him to treat you better. If he dares to bully you again, tell Grandma that Grandma will never favor him. Then I am Grandma's legitimate granddaughter. I will definitely be filial to Grandma. Wen Shuyi had a smile on her face, but she felt something else in her heart. As Mrs. Liu and Wen Shuyi were helping the old gu out of the door, they ran into Gu Yuechen. He saw Wen Shuyi supporting her grandmother affectionately, talking and laughing, and vaguely heard something the granddaughter said. He said coldly, Wen Shuyi, stop your sweet talk. Don't just try to make people happy but forget to finish. His coldness was like a bucket of cold water poured over Wen Shuyi's head, chilling her to the bone. The tips of her fingers that were holding the old lady instantly began to bleed and turned pale and cold. Gu Yuechen's appearance on the set caused a sensation. He has a certain aura that makes people look up to him, and his cold and sharp expression, the sense of aloofness that comes with a successful man, makes people even more fascinating. Not to mention the shocking background behind him, which gave people an inner shock. Gu Yuechen, why is he here? In everyone's eyes, Gu Yuechen is successful in his career, handsome and rich, and is the Prince Charming in the eyes of all women. But in Wen Shuyi's eyes, he was just an iceberg that would never melt. No, what is more terrifying than the iceberg is the pitch-black deep ocean trench where no sunlight can be seen. Even if she sacrifices her life in this life, there will not be a single bit of warmth that can come from him. Wen Shuyi only felt the coldness running through her limbs. She subconsciously hugged her arms tightly to seek a little warmth, but she stood there without moving. Brother Yuechen. Lu Xinran appeared out of nowhere and rushed into Gu Yuechen's arms regardless of everything. She looked up and asked him, why are you here? Chapter 10, Lu Xinran's Tea Talk. This action caused another commotion in the crew, and the laughter became sharp and piercing in Wen Shuyi's ears. Wen Shuyi felt that her heart, which had been broken for a long time, was breaking again. This had happened more than once, over and over again. She had actually become accustomed to this kind of pain. Wen Shuyi. Gu Yuechen's voice carried a warning tone. Yuechen. Liu Yuhua hesitated to speak. It's okay, Grandma. I'll have a good talk with him. Wen Shuyi endured the discomfort and said tactfully, and immediately arranged for Sister Liu, Sister Liu, please send Grandma to the car first, I'll be there in a moment. Mrs. Liu looked at her worriedly, then helped Grandma leave. Is there anything that requires you to talk like this? Wen Shuyi looked at Lu Xinran in Gu Yuechen's arms and suddenly found it ridiculous. She and Bai Yi knew clearly that what he said was unbearable, but it was Gu Yuechen and Lu Xinran who were unclear about it, and she was threatened by them instead. What followed was a long-suppressed grievance and anger. Wen Shuyi's eyes suddenly tightened, and then she realized her strange thoughts and slowly let go. It seemed that what happened to them had nothing to do with her. I think from this situation, Master Ji Yu is here specifically to look for Wen Shuyi. What's their relationship? It's said that Master Jiyu has a secret marriage with a beautiful wife. Could it be Wen Shuyi? Look at the way Master Jiyu looks at Wen Shuyi, it's like he caught his cheating wife. Lu Xinran's face turned pale when she heard this. No. We must not let anyone know that Yu Chen and Wen Shuyi are husband and wife. Lu Xinran looked at Wen Shuyi and said coquettishly, Hey, Shuyi, Yu Chen is your brother after all, how can you talk to Yu Chen like this? This statement immediately caused an uproar. What? I've never heard that Master Jiyu has a younger sister before. They are actually brother and sister. Mr. Jiyu, is Wen Shuyi really your sister? Listening to people around her discussing their relationship, Wen Shuyi remained silent. She just wanted to see how Jiyu Yuchen would answer. Upon hearing this, Jiyu Yuchen stared at Wen Shuyi. Seeing that she looked as if it was none of his business, his eyebrows raised unconsciously and his tense jaw nodded slightly. What kind of expression was that on her face? Wen Shuyi's face was full of sarcasm. Brother and sister. Brother and sister fooling around in bed. The pain in her heart became more and more sharp. Wen Shuyi wanted to suppress it, but she found that her tears had already burst out. In the end, she had no ability to resist it all and left in a hurry. Wen Shuyi got into the car and was about to close the door when she was stopped by a pair of strong hands. Seeing that it was Jiyu Yuchen, Wen Shuyi became a little angry and tried to close the car door, but in the end she was no match for the man's strength. As soon as the man sat down, Wen Shuyi smelled a faint perfume. It was from Lu Xinran. Wen Shuyi really disliked it. The old lady obviously noticed that the atmosphere between the two was not right, and said to Jiyu Yuchen earnestly, Yu Chen, Xiaoyi has promised not to divorce you, you should be nicer to Xiaoyi in the future, don't be so cold-faced all the time, even the warmest heart can be frozen by you. Upon hearing this, Jiyu Yuchen looked at Wen Shuyi with cold eyes, trying to see through the deepest secrets in her heart. Some people's hearts are not ice, but bottomless black holes. Jiyu Yuchen said coldly, but he saw her lowering her brows and looking submissive, with an appearance of being humble and enduring. The irritability in Gu Yuechen's heart was like a flickering flame, getting more and more intense. She would act pretentiously, but she was not like this in front of Bai Yi. Her liveliness and vitality were always for others. Liu Yuhua really loves her grandson. She just glanced at Gu Yuechen with a reproachful look and said, Take me to the hospital with Xiaoyi. I'm about to cough my lungs out. Please stop worrying about me. You two are really a pair of enemies, are? Hospital. Wen Shuyi asked someone to help her, so the test results came out quickly. The doctor in charge frowned as he looked at the lung CT scan and said, The old lady's condition has been going on for a long time. You should pay attention to it. After all, the elderly can't bear it as much as you look down on them. Upon hearing that the condition was serious, Wen Shuyi became a little nervous. Is there a problem? The doctor glanced at the old lady, wanting to speak but stopping himself. Wen Shuyi immediately said to Sister Liu, help Grandma go outside for a walk first. Yu Chen and I will stay here. Sister Liu was also a little dazed, and only came back to her senses after hearing Wen Shuyi's instructions. Okay, I see that the greening of this hospital is well done. I will help the old lady to sit in the yard. When Sister Liu helped the old lady out, Gu Yuechen called in and went outside to answer the phone. The doctor pointed to the shadow on the CT scan and said, The lungs are mildly fibrotic and the alveoli have been eroded. They need to be controlled with medication. You also need to keep the old lady in a happy mood. This will delay the onset of the disease. Wen Shuyi felt a little sad. She felt her legs going weak and her whole body was dizzy. She didn't know how to leave the doctor's office until she heard Lu Xinran's voice talking and laughing. She suddenly woke up and looked up, and saw Lu Xinran and Gu Yuechen supporting the old lady on the left and right, with flattering looks in their eyes. Grandma, do you think Xiaoyi is amazing? In the TV series, she is a vicious imperial concubine. A few days ago, we had a scene together, and I was much worse than her at acting vicious. What's going on? Aren't you a movie queen? How could you suffer such a loss? You don't know, I'm a straightforward person. I always lack something when playing those dark and vicious roles, but Xiaoyi is different. She played it vividly and lifelike. I almost thought she was like that in real life. Lu Xinran's voice was sweet, and there was always a sweet smile in her eyes when she spoke. Who would have thought that she was indirectly saying that Wen Shuyi was vicious at heart, while Gu Yuechen seemed to enjoy Lu Xinran making his grandmother happy? Wen Shuyi stood there silently, the doctor's instructions just now circling in her mind. She tried to calm down and gently called out, "Grandma." Liu Yuhua likes Wen Shuyi and treats her as a family member, but she also doesn't hate Lu Xinran for being well-behaved and beautiful, and always looking likable. Wen Shuyi looked calm at this moment, but there was always some displeasure in her eyebrows and eyes. If Liu Yuhua didn't know Wen Shuyi well, she would have almost misunderstood her. "Xiaoyi, Xinran from the crew heard that I came to their hospital, and she immediately bought a fruit basket to come and see me. I think if you two get along well, you can become good friends," Liu Yuhua said. Wen Shuyi suppressed her disgust and said calmly, "Grandma, how do you feel? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Do you want to sit down and rest for a while?" Gu Yuechen thought that Wen Shuyi was being immature, and her lukewarm attitude made him irritated. He subconsciously loosened his tie. "Wen Shuyi, Grandma just talked to you, didn't you hear it? Grandma hopes that you and Xinran get along well. Can you stop acting like everyone owes you something? It's easy to find a pretext to accuse someone of a crime." Wen Shuyi was just worried about her grandmother, but Gu Yuechen understood that she refused to get along with Lu Xinran. She looked at Gu Yuechen indifferently, only to see that his eyebrows were already full of coldness, but his attitude could no longer affect her emotions. Liu Yuhua could tell that Gu Yuechen was targeting his granddaughter-in-law, so she tried to smooth things over. "Yuechen, how can you talk like that? Don't treat Xiaoyi like the president of your company. She is your wife, and you should take care of her." Gu Yuechen pursed his lips, his thin lips full of resistance and indifference. Wen Shuyi didn't care. The doctor's instructions were all in her mind. She didn't want to make her grandma angry, so she restrained herself. "Grandma, it's okay. Yuechen has his own ideas. I'm not angry." Seeing her like this, Gu Yuechen felt that she was trying to please the old lady, and asked with a cold look in his eyes, "What are the results of the examination? Did the doctor say anything to pay attention to?" Wen Shuyi found it difficult to speak for a moment. She couldn't tell the old lady about her illness directly, as it would not be good for her health. She just looked at Gu Yuechen, hoping that he could understand that she wanted to talk in private. At this time, Lu Xinran said with an unhappy look on his face, "Shuyi, just say whatever you want to say, don't be so mysterious. You will make Grandma think too much. If she thinks she has a serious illness and becomes mentally burdened, you can't bear the responsibility." After this reminder, everyone looked at Wen Shuyi, and it seemed that Wen Shuyi was indeed not very frank. Wen Shuyi looked at Lu Xinran calmly and said, "Yuechen and I are husband and wife, so it's normal for us to talk about something in private. But your attitude of wanting to interfere in everything seems a bit nosy. Yuechen, I want to talk to you about something." I thought Gu Yuechen would stand on her side. If for no other reason, just for the old lady's health, Gu Yuechen shouldn't get angry with her at this time. And in front of Lu Xinran, Wen Shuyi didn't want to lose face every time. Unexpectedly, Gu Yuechen stood there motionless, looked at Wen Shuyi coldly and said, "There is nothing between us that cannot be heard by Grandma and Xinran. Just say what you want to say, no need to hide from anyone." Wen Shuyi suddenly wanted to laugh. The truth was like a camera without filters, clear and unconcealable. She had always known who Gu Yuechen had in his heart, and now she could finally face it calmly. Lu Xinran looked over with a smug look, and Wen Shuyi also looked over coldly and calmly, until Lu Xinran felt bored and lowered his head. She said softly, "Yuechen, let's talk about our affairs another day. If there is nothing else, you should send Grandma back first. She needs to rest now." Gu Yuechen sneered. How much did she wish for him and his grandmother to leave so that she could have an ambiguous relationship with that Bai Yi? He looked at Wen Shuyi and said in a tough tone, "Grandma came to the film and television base just to see you. If you had listened and waited at home one more night, she wouldn't have to travel so long. Today, you come back with me. When Grandma's illness gets better, you can come back to the film and television base." Wen Shuyi raised her head abruptly and looked at Gu Yuechen with confused and bewildered eyes. Was he punishing her again? With his cold-blooded selfishness and his ruthless shackles, did he really think that she would be trapped in this small space by him for the rest of her life and would never have peace? Chapter 11. Gu Yuechen, you misunderstood. Wen Shuyi had already stood up the director today. Originally, they had agreed to add a few more scenes today to catch up with the schedule. Wen Shuyi said without hesitation, "You and Grandma go back first. I'll shoot a few scenes in the next few days and then go back to take care of Grandma." The old lady came to the set to see her today, and Wen Shuyi was very touched. She had no relatives around her. The Wen family cared more about the family business. Her younger brother was also missing. When she saw the old lady, the gentleness that had disappeared for a long time reappeared. She really wanted to take good care of her grandmother for a while, even for a month, so that she could repay her grandmother for her kindness and understanding. One day, she and Gu Yuechen would divorce without any regrets. Wen Shuyi, don't think that I can't guess what's in your mind. You must go back with me today, otherwise, don't even think about setting foot in the Gu family again. Gu Yuechen said coldly. Liu Yuhua thought the couple was having a quarrel, so she said with a smile, Yuchen, don't make things difficult for Xiaoyi. It's not that serious. I just have a cough. I'll be fine after I go home and take some medicine. Grandma, please don't protect her. She is not as well behaved as she looks. While Gu Yuechen was speaking, he still looked at Wen Shuyi deeply, as if reminding her of something. At this time, Lu Xinran hurried forward to support the old lady, and said with a smile, Xiaoyi is the second female lead in this drama, so she must be busy. Even if she wants to leave, the investors won't allow it. Shuyi, don't you agree? Lu Xinran had a smile on her face, but there was a hint of malice in her eyes. Wen Shuyi knew that she was implying that Bai Yi would not let him go, so she ignored her. Brother Yuchen, please stop forcing Xiaoyi. How about this? I'll give up this drama and go back to take care of Grandma, and let Xiaoyi concentrate on the filming. Who knows, after this drama is finished, she may become a big star and become a movie queen. Lu Xinran deliberately provoked trouble. Liu Yuhua was a very smart person. He could tell there was something behind the words, but he couldn't say anything. After all, Lu Xinran's brother died to save Yuchen. In her heart, taking care of Lu Xinran is also a responsibility. Have you said enough? Wen Shuyi asked with a frown. Why are you so fierce? I'm just stating the truth. This drama is invested by Bai Yi, so it will definitely be a hit. Then won't you become famous too? Not every actor is as lucky as you. Take me for example. I relied on my own efforts to become a movie queen. I can't compare with you. Lu Xinran was openly praising but secretly attacking him, with a smile on his face all the time. Wen Shuyi knew that if she got angry, she would be fooled. Seeing Gu Yuechen's increasingly gloomy expression, Wen Shuyi knew that Lu Xinran was the fuse at this moment. Gu Yuechen would listen to whatever she said, which was more effective than pillow talk. This really showed Lu Xinran's ability. But she would not let Lu Xinran continue to say that. She looked at the old lady and said, Grandma, I'll talk to Yuchen. Let Sister Liu help you get in the car and rest first. Liu Yuhua looked at Wen Shuyi lovingly. She was right. Xiaoyi was much more generous than Lu Xinran. Xiaoyi, Grandma knows you are very busy filming a TV series. Don't force yourself. I have Sister Liu by my side. You can work with peace of mind. Thank you, Grandma, for understanding me. Wen Shuyi's voice was hoarse. When she encountered such understanding, she couldn't help feeling sad. Sister Liu helped Liu Yuhua to leave. Lu Xinran refused to leave, but Wen Shuyi didn't take it to heart. She looked at Gu Yuechen with a frown and said, Yuchen, the doctor said that Grandma's condition is not very optimistic and needs good treatment. I will rush back to accompany Grandma as soon as I finish my work here. Don't worry. Before he could finish his words, Wen Shuyi's phone rang. Just after the call was connected, Bai Yi's gentle and calm voice came from the other end of the line. There is a promotional live broadcast in the morning. When will you be back? Mr. Bai, I'll go back right after I finish dealing with things here. Wen Shuyi said embarrassedly. Bai Yi has helped her so much, she can't let him make things difficult for her again and again. Director Jing probably didn't want to call her, so he asked Bai Yi to call her and urge her to go back. Although their voice was not loud, Gu Yuechen heard it clearly. The irritation on his face became more and more obvious. He said coldly, if you are looking for an excuse not to go back, why do you have to be so pretentious? Are you and Bai Yi playing a double game? Lu Xinran saw something and deliberately chased after him and shook Gu Yuechen's arm. Brother Yuchen, don't be angry with Shuyi. She must be in a difficult situation. After all, Bai Yi saved her once a few days ago. How can you ask her to reject Bai Yi? Every word Lu Xinran said was adding fuel to the fire. When Shuyi tried to calm down and said to Gu Yuechen, I want to go back to the crew now. You dare? Gu Yuechen's eyes suddenly became deep. Wen Shuyi and Gu Yuechen were facing off, but Lu Xinran continued to interfere. In the car, Mrs. Liu saw Lu Xinran and Gu Yuechen being intimate, and she said unhappily, "Madam, do you think that Lu Xinran is too close to the gentleman?" In front of the lady, they held hands. The lady would definitely be angry, and maybe that's the reason for their conflict. "Mrs. Liu, how can I not see that Lu Xinran also likes Yuechen, but I am a grandmother, so I can only say so much. If I really speak openly, it will be difficult to smooth things over. Old lady, it turns out you know everything. It seems I was overthinking it. Mrs. Liu, you don't think too much about it. Lu Xinran is too scheming. Even if she likes Yuechen and Yuechen also likes her a little, I won't let them be together." After Liu Yuhua finished speaking, she leaned back in the back seat and closed her eyes to rest. Mrs. Liu looked at the situation outside, shook her head, and stopped talking. Wen Shuyi originally didn't want to let outsiders know about her grandmother's illness, but judging from the situation, Lu Xinran was no longer an outsider, and she seemed to have become a stubborn person. "Yuechen, grandma's condition is not very optimistic. Fibrosis has appeared in her lungs. The doctor said that she needs to take medicine every day to resist the progression of fibrosis. He also said that we need to keep grandma in a good mood and not let her get angry again." After Wen Shuyi finished speaking, she originally wanted to hear Gu Yuechen's opinion. After all, the health of the elderly is important, and personal emotional issues should be put aside. Unexpectedly, Gu Yuechen remained silent, and Lu Xinran spoke first. "Who knows if the doctor you hired is professional? Maybe it was a misdiagnosis. Some people just think the matter is not serious enough and always make it sound so serious. In my opinion, the old lady is in good health and can live to be 120 years old. LV Xinran, I don't care what happens between you and Gu Yuechen, but please don't fight me with this kind of thing. What era is this? You are still so reluctant to see a doctor. Will you be responsible if your condition is delayed?" Wen Shuyi didn't want to endure it anymore and retorted directly. "Wen Shuyi, maybe you deliberately made the illness sound so serious in order to win back brother Yuechen. You know the old lady loves you, so you want brother Yuechen to beg you to go back, right?" Lu Xinran deliberately distorted the facts. She stared at Wen Shuyi, and the malice in her eyes was self-evident. How could she not understand the old lady's intention of coming today? She could even smell it. The old lady likes Wen Shuyi and has been persuading them to reconcile instead of separate. If Wen Shuyi really goes back with Gu Yuechen this time, maybe the two of them will really reconcile with the help of the old lady. How can Lu Xinran tolerate this? The man she had been thinking about day and night had been looking forward to their divorce soon, so she had to seize this opportunity. Wen Shuyi looked into Lu Xinran's eyes, staring directly into hers. She really wanted to shake off all the filth in Lu Xinran's heart and let it dry in the sun, but she felt it was unnecessary. She was about to get divorced, so why should she be so hard on Lu Xinran? "LV Xinran, what you think is your business, what I do is my business. Please don't use your brain to measure other people's thoughts. It's stupid." "You?" Lu Xinran was choked back again. She looked at Gu Yuechen with some grievance and stopped talking. Gu Yuechen narrowed his dark eyes, and a dangerous aura enveloped him. Although the sun was shining brightly, he could clearly feel layers of coldness gradually spreading out from him. The person who had been silent all the time suddenly walked up to Wen Shuyi, grabbed her hand and asked, "If you want to use the matter of taking care of grandma to threaten me and make me accommodate you, then I will tell you now that you are dreaming." Wen Shuyi glared at Gu Yuechen and said coldly, "Let me go, this is the hospital entrance, not Gu's house." Gu Yuechen's mouth corners suddenly curled slightly, and the coldness seemed to suddenly rush from the soles of his feet to his brows. "Thank you for reminding me, then today I will take you back to Gu's house and ask you, what do you want?" Wen Shuyi felt like her wrist was about to be crushed. She was no match for Gu Yuechen in strength and was dragged for several meters. People were coming and going at the hospital entrance, all casting strange looks at him. Wen Shuyi considered Gu Yuechen's identity and whispered, "Yuechen, let go. Can't you just talk it out nicely? If you drag it on like this, people will see you and say bad things. After all, you are. Oh, you are afraid of being seen by Bai Yi. Are you afraid that he will be sad, or afraid that he will feel sorry for you? Wen Shuyi, just say whatever you want to say. Why do you have to pretend to be pitiful? What I hate most is hypocrisy." Wen Shuyi didn't understand at all why things between her and Gu Yuechen turned out like this. The misunderstanding seemed to be getting deeper and deeper, as deep as a bottomless ravine. She stubbornly shook off Gu Yuechen's hand and said firmly, "I don't want to go back, and I won't go back. Gu Yuechen, it's not because of others, but because it's impossible for the two of us to be together. Do you think that things can still be left to you now that they have come to this point? I will find a chance to explain everything to Grandma and tell her that I was the one who proposed the divorce. You don't have to worry that Grandma will blame you. When the time comes, you can say whatever you want. You can say that I have someone else, or that I don't deserve your love. It's all fine. In short, I won't go back to the Gu family." After Wen Shuyi finished speaking, she looked at Gu Yuechen coldly. The two looked at each other, and there was no warmth in their eyes. The entangled irritability and disgust in Gu Yuechen's eyes were clearly visible, and Wen Shuyi's tiredness and calmness were also very obvious. In Gu Yuechen's opinion, Wen Shuyi is becoming more and more courageous. In the past, she would care about the Wen family's business and her brother's safety, and she even begged him more than once. But now it was different. He clearly felt that a powerful force seemed to have been injected into her heart. She was no longer afraid of him, nor would she compromise anymore. "I never say the same thing a second time. Even if you don't do it for Grandma, you should think about your brother and don't force me to do something I shouldn't do," Gu Yuechen reminded coldly. Chapter 12. How long do you want to threaten me? Speaking of her brother, Wen Shuyi's heart, which had been calm all this time, was suddenly startled. She looked at Gu Yuechen, and her inner disappointment had reached its peak. Although people come and go around her, Wen Shuyi feels that there are only two people in the world. One is Gu Yuechen, who keeps threatening her, and the other is her, who is full of anger. Her face was calm, and the angrier she got, the more she hid it. "Gu Yuechen, don't bring up the Wen family's business to talk to my brother. How great is it for a man to win by threatening a woman?" In an instant, Gu Yuechen's expression turned from dark to angry, and from angry to cold. He stared at Wen Shuyi and said, "When you ignored our child and stayed with Bai Yi, I had to resort to such means to deal with a woman like you. Wen Shuyi, my means are not very clever, but they are just right for dealing with you and that shameless Bai Yi." Wen Shuyi had already explained what happened at that time. She was tired and didn't want to explain any more. She looked at Gu Yuechen with disdain, her eyes devoid of any emotion. "Do you think you can threaten me with my brother and the Wen family's business for the rest of my life? Do you think that without you, our Wen family will be doomed? Gu Yuechen, you think too highly of yourself. You are at most the CEO of Gu Corporation, and you cannot control the life and death of anyone." Bai Yi said that he would soon find his brother's whereabouts, which was also the trump card in Wen Shuyi's hand. Once she finds her brother, she can divorce Gu Yuechen legitimately, and she will no longer have any evidence in Gu Yuechen's hands to control her. "It's true that I can't control the life and death of everyone, but one phone call is enough to prevent you and your brother from seeing each other again in this life. Wen Shuyi, do you want to try it?" Gu Yuechen took out his phone and said to Wen Shuyi coldly. Unexpectedly, there was still stubborn resistance and opposition in Wen Shuyi's eyes. She would never be like this before. Wen Shuyi loves Wen Yuechen to the point that she values him more than her own life, so why would she confront him so forcefully? Could it be that she has found Wen Yuechen's whereabouts? Gu Yuechen held the phone tightly, but his expression did not change. He just looked at Wen Shuyi, whose face turned pale, and said, "You don't have to be so self-indulgent and think that I want to do something to you. I just don't want to make Grandma worry. If you insist on going against my wishes, you may not be able to bear the consequences." Wen Shuyi knew that Gu Yuechen always kept his word. She stared at his mobile phone, fearing that if he gave an order, her brother would be transferred to another place. In that case, even if Bai Yi had great ability, he would probably not be able to find her brother. "I need to ask the director for leave." Wen Shuyi originally wanted to talk to Bai Yi and ask him to find his brother's whereabouts as soon as possible to avoid any further complications. Unexpectedly, Gu Yuechen said directly, "Get in the car first. It's the same if you call to ask for leave in the car. I don't have that much time to waste here." Wen Shuyi got into the car with a sullen face. Seeing Wen Shuyi leaving, Lu Xinran tried to pull Gu Yuechen's clothes, and said a little aggrievedly, "Brother Yuechen, what about me? Actually, you don't have to make Xiaoyi so embarrassed. It's the same if I go back. I am willing to put down my work for Grandma." Gu Yuechen took a step back and Lu Xinran's hand missed. LV Xinran, taking care of Grandma is what she should do as a granddaughter-in-law. What does it have to do with you? Gu Yuechen's words were chilling. Lu Xinran sensed a sense of intimidation and immediately shut up and stopped talking. She watched Gu Yuechen and Wen Shuyi get into the car, feeling extremely jealous. She gritted her teeth, stood on the main road, and said viciously, "Wen Shuyi, sooner or later, I will make brother Yuchen hate you completely and make sure you can never go back to the Gu family." Before boarding the plane, Wen Shuyi asked the director for leave. Although the director was a little dissatisfied, Wen Shuyi spoke sincerely and the director finally agreed to let her take care of her grandmother first. After the plane landed, Gu Yuechen did not get in the same car with Wen Shuyi. Wen Shuyi just thought he was busy with work and didn't take it to heart. Seeing that she was a little absent-minded, Liu Yuhua smiled and said, "Yuchen is very busy at work, don't blame him. It's because I, as a grandmother, don't care enough about him that his personality has become so cold and selfish. Xiaoyi, please be more understanding. Grandma, I was just thinking about work, not. Don't hide it. In fact, I can see that Yuchen likes you very much. He has never been so proactive in pestering anyone in his life." Liu Yuhua said. When Shuyi didn't know how her grandmother came to this conclusion, she just smiled silently. She looked at the familiar scenery outside the window, but had an urge to escape at any moment. If pestering someone means love, then she feels that the world would be quite peaceful if no one loves it. After returning to the Gu family, Mrs. Liu arranged for the old lady to rest. When Shuyi immediately contacted the Gu family's family doctor. Although the doctor there was reliable, he was not someone the Gu family trusted. She had to ask the family doctor to find a way to have another checkup for grandma. Are you saying that the old lady's illness is irreversible? These are the doctor's original words, but we still have to be optimistic. Yuchen is so filial, he will definitely try his best to treat grandma. Now all we have to do is to have another checkup for grandma, preferably in a hospital she often goes to. Moreover, we have to keep the whole process confidential. The family doctor sighed with some appreciation. It's rare that you are so concerned, madam. The whole Gu family also asks about her health with words. No one has ever cared so much about the old lady's health. Grandma is very kind to me, so I will naturally return the favor. Dr. Wang, thank you for your help. Please rest assured. I will arrange it as soon as possible and will not let the old lady know about it. Dr. Wang hung up the phone. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening, and Gu Yuechen had not returned yet. Wen Shuyi knew that he wanted to avoid her, so she didn't ask any more questions and just stayed in the kitchen to help her grandma make soup. Since she is here, she should make the best of it. Now that she is back, she will naturally do her best to take care of her grandmother. Sister Liu helped Wen Shuyi tie her apron and said with a smile, "The old lady said she likes the ginseng soup made by madam. It is light and delicious. It can't be compared with the hot soup made by the servants." Wen Shuyi smiled gently. It's not a very sophisticated technique. Just boil it for half an hour, use a grate to remove the floating oil on top, and add a little beer to remove the fishy smell. Then the soup will taste good. Yes, that's right. The old lady has mentioned it many times. I always ask the servants to remember it, but they can't remember it. Every time they make it, it tastes the same old way, greasy and fishy. Sister Liu praised Wen Shuyi in different ways. Because of Wen Shuyi's presence, the family finally had some homely atmosphere. At this time, a servant came in and reported, "Madam, Miss Wen Yu is here. She said she has something important to discuss with you." When Mrs. Liu heard that it was Wen Yu, she frowned and said, "It's so late, don't other people rest? Ask her to go back and come back tomorrow during the day." Sister Liu knew the relationship between Wen Shuyi and Wen Yu, so she naturally wanted to help Wen Shuyi to stop them. In this family, only the old lady understood the good of the young lady, so naturally, as an old lady, she also had to know how to behave. At this time, the servant said with some embarrassment, "I said so too, but Miss Wen Yu said." "What did she say?" "She said I was nothing. She said the young lady was her sister. As a servant, I could only make reports and had no right to make decisions for the young lady. She also said that if she couldn't see the young lady, she would stay here and not leave." After the servant finished speaking, she looked at Sister Liu and Wen Shuyi helplessly. Sister Liu knew that Wen Yu was difficult to deal with, and was about to go out to meet her in person, but Wen Shuyi took the lead and whispered, "Sister Liu, don't worry about it. She came to see me, and I'll go out to meet her and she'll be at peace, so that she won't cause trouble for everyone. Sister Liu didn't say anything, but just said calmly, "If you are really embarrassed to drive her away, I will come forward, madam, you don't have to be embarrassed." "Well, I know my limits." Wen Shuyi turned down the heat, told the servants to watch carefully, and left the kitchen. In the living room, Wen Yu looked around at the furnishings in the Gu family's living room. As she looked, she felt jealous. If it weren't for her mistake in the beginning, all of this in the Gu family would be hers, and it would not be Wen Shuyi's turn. The mural in the living room was a magnificent picture of vast mountains and rivers, with clouds embroidered with gold threads and glittering. The painting was estimated to be worth at least tens of millions. Wen Yuechen was deeply hurt again. However, she changed her mind and thought that Wen Shuyi and Gu Yuechen were not in a good relationship now. If she could see Gu Yuechen more often and tell him that he was going to marry her at that time, maybe she would still have a chance to become Mrs. Gu. "Wen Yu, it's so late, what do you want to talk to me about?" Wen Shuyi walked in gracefully. There was no more awkwardness between her eyebrows and eyes than before she got married. Instead, there was an indescribable charm. It was indeed a wealthy family that could make a rough girl look wealthy. Especially the clothes that Wen Shuyi wears are all from big brands, which are not something that any ordinary person can afford. Wen Yu has been a celebrity for a long time, and she only rents some branded clothes when attending events. She simply cannot afford to wear such brands every day. But now seeing Wen Shuyi cooking in this kind of clothes, it really makes people envious and jealous. Wen Yu suppressed her jealousy and said with a different expression, "Sister, you have to help me. I have fewer and fewer resources for filming. A few days ago, a director asked me to play a small role without showing my front. Don't you think it's infuriating? Isn't that the job of an extra?" Wen Yu knew that as long as Wen Shuyi was in the Gu family, Gu Yuechen would definitely come back. As long as she talks more with Wen Shuyi, she will definitely wait for Gu Yuechen. Then, she can take the opportunity to live in Gu's house and spend more time with Gu Yuechen. In this way, Wen Shuyi was just a chess piece she used and could be discarded at any time. There was nothing shameful about her bowing down and begging. Chapter 13 Taking Medicine. Wen Shuyi understood Wen Yu's intention and replied indifferently, "Oh, that's normal. It's the same when starting from scratch." Wen Yu was furious, but thinking about the purpose of her visit, she could only suppress it. "But sister, I don't want this. Look at me, I'm so beautiful, I'm born to be the heroine. I definitely don't want to be a supporting role." Wen Shuyi was a little impatient, "Just looking for me for this? If there is nothing else, you should go back first, it's getting late." It's so late. "Sister, can I stay at your place tonight? I still have a lot to say to you." Wen Shuyi frowned slightly. Wen Yu arrived quite late. She was afraid that this time she came here just as an excuse and actually wanted to stay here. When Wen Yu was speaking, her eyes intentionally or unintentionally looked upstairs, and her target was obviously Gu Yuechen. Seeing the other woman's feelings for Gu Yuechen, Wen Shuyi felt uncomfortable. Although the distance between them was getting farther and farther, her feelings for him had not changed. She couldn't do anything about Lu Xinran, but she would definitely stop Wen Yu. Wen Shuyi raised her eyes and coldly ordered her to leave. "It's not convenient, you can go back." Wen Yu didn't expect Wen Shuyi to be so tough. She was surprised and even more angry. She gritted her teeth and shouted, "Sister." Wen Shuyi didn't want to argue anymore, so she glanced at her calmly and called out, "Sister Liu, send the guest away." After saying that, Wen Shuyi went upstairs. Liu Yuhua had already gone to bed. She was exhausted after all the running around today. After entering the room, Wen Shuyi dragged her exhausted body into the bathroom to wash. Usually, she lived here alone, and she was used to coming out wrapped in a bath towel. However, when she came out today, she was frightened by the figure sitting on the bed. Wen Shuyi's body trembled, and the towel she was holding almost fell off. She instinctively took a step back. Why are you here?" Gu Yuechen had just taken a shower. He was wearing a bathrobe, with half-dry hair dripping down his huge collar. His whole body exuded masculine hormones. At the beginning, Wen Shuyi fell in love with him because of this face. At this moment, she couldn't help but stare at him, her face slightly red. Gu Yuechen raised his eyes and looked at her with contempt, taking in all her subtle changes. The disgust in his eyes stung Wen Shuyi's eyes, and she turned her head away. "Dad ate her." Gu Yuechen walked in front of her and lifted her chin, like a god high above with pity for all living beings. You're obviously very happy to see me, why are you pretending to be surprised? Oh, it's really ridiculous. His room is occupied by Liu Yuhua, and the old man is deliberately trying to match them up. Where else can he sleep except here? Wen Shuyi met his deep eyes. Before, there was tenderness in those eyes, but at this moment, there was only disgust. Her heart choked. Thinking that she could escape soon, she didn't want to cause any more trouble, so she chose to endure it. Then you sleep on the bed, and I'll sleep on the sofa. After saying this, Wen Shuyi was about to leave, but was rudely pulled back by Gu Yuechen. He narrowed his eyes and was already angry. He didn't know what he was angry about. Maybe he was angry that this woman always acted half-dead towards him. If it was Bai Yi who appeared here today, this woman would have been eager to strip herself and lie on the bed, right? Thinking of this, Gu Yuechen used force to grab Wen Shuyi's shoulder, causing it to turn red. Wen Shuyi felt pain and said, Gu Yuechen, what are you doing? It hurts. Pain? It hurts now. Wen Shuyi, compared to what you did, this is nothing. When you carried Bai Yi's child on my back and put a hat on me, did you ever think about whether it hurt me? Gu Yuechen, Before she could explain, Wen Shuyi was knocked over by a huge force and finally dragged on the carpet. She had tied the bath towel carelessly, and it had come apart, exposing most of her body. Wen Shuyi desperately grabbed the towel and was thrown onto the bed by Gu Yuechen. Gu Yuechen pulled her towel away without hesitation, and the mockery on his lips became more and more intense. Bai Yi may be very fond of your tricks, but it won't work on me. Wen Shuyi, lie down obediently and don't play those nonsense games. It will not do you any good to irritate me. Gu Yuechen, how many times do I have to say that Bai Yi and I are innocent? Can you please stop thinking about our relationship with your dirty mind? Wen Shuyi pulled up the quilt and was about to cover herself, but was held down tightly by Gu Yuechen. Gu Yuechen freed his other hand and pulled open the bathrobe. At this time, Wen Shuyi realized that he was not wearing anything inside, so he came here just to do this. Now, Gu Yuechen has already regarded her as a tool for sexual release. Before Wen Shuyi could get out of this anger, Gu Yuechen fiercely entered her. His movements were extremely rough. Wen Shuyi frowned in pain, and he smiled with satisfaction. After a night of tossing and turning, Wen Shuyi wanted to sleep in, but was woken up by Gu Yuechen. Grandma always gets up early, you come back to take care of her, what qualifications do you have to lie in bed? Wen Shuyi struggled to get up. She wrapped herself in a quilt to hide the bruises on her body. With Liu Yuhua around, Gu Yuechen was considerate and didn't get her neck covered with bruises. Her body felt as if it had been run over by a car. When Wen Shuyi was washing up, she felt dizzy. She had no idea what she was doing. She felt better only after washing her face. After going downstairs, she found Liu Yuhua already sitting in the dining room, waiting for the two of them to have breakfast. Seeing Liu Yuhua, Wen Shuyi's mood immediately improved. She wanted to run, but she couldn't take big steps after last night's tossing and turning. She could only walk slowly. Grandma, are you feeling uncomfortable? If you are not feeling well, you should get more sleep. Liu Yuhua also smiled and said, good boy, Grandma feels much better after a good sleep, but you don't look very energetic, why don't you sleep a little longer? Because I want to see my grandma soon. Wen Shuyi squatted down and hugged Liu Yuhua, her eyes becoming sore. Liu Yuhua is her only comfort in the Gu family. It feels so good to be cared for by others. Oh, seeing you like this, people who don't know would think that our Gu family abused you. That's enough. No one here wants to watch your performance. Gu Yuechen's chilling words stopped Wen Shuyi. She stood up, sat down next to Liu Yuhua, and served her medicine and breakfast. She still needs to ask the doctor about the specific treatment plan for Liu Yuhua's body. No matter what, Liu Yuhua must not be allowed to get hurt. After dinner, Wen Shuyi helped Liu Yuhua take a walk in the garden, and finally watched TV in the living room. While Wen Shuyi was asking the doctor about Liu Yuhua's physical condition, suddenly, a baby crying sound was heard from the TV. Wen Shuyi's hands froze and she looked up mechanically. Many times, she wondered, if their first child was born, would he be this big? After the miscarriage, she did not look at any photos or videos of the baby because she was afraid that she would think of her dead child. Seeing her like this, Liu Yuhua thought she wanted to be a mother, so she grabbed her hand and patted it gently. Shuyi, when can you and Yuchen give me a big fat boy to take care of? I really want to hold my grandson. Wen Shuyi's face was stiff. Grandma, there is no rush for this kind of thing. The child will come if he is destined to be with her. Impossible, she would not let herself get pregnant with Gu Yuechen's child. With just one younger brother, she was already restricted by Gu Yuechen. If she had another child, she would never be able to escape the cage he had given her in her entire life. Suddenly, Wen Shuyi remembered something and pulled her hand back. Grandma, I'm going upstairs to get something, wait for me. Okay. Liu Yuhua stared at the screen with infatuated eyes. It seemed that she really wanted to hold her grandson. Wen Shuyi went upstairs slowly. They had not used any safety precautions when they had sex last night. When Gu Yuechen woke her up this morning, she was in a daze and had forgotten about it. No, she couldn't let herself get pregnant. Wen Shuyi opened the drawer of the bedside table and found a small bottle in the innermost part. She carefully twisted the cap off the bottle and poured out 2 pills into her hand. Just as she was about to raise her head to take them, a voice suddenly came from behind her. What are you doing sneakily? With a click, the bottle fell to the ground and the pills inside rolled out. There were not many left. When Shuyi saw who was coming, her face turned pale, and she squatted down in panic, trying to pick up the pills. Just when she was about to pick up the bottle, a big hand took it up before her. When Shuyi's heart rose to her throat. What should I do? If Gu Yuechen saw it, how would he punish me? No, why would he punish her? He should be the one who least wanted her to get pregnant. Contraceptive pills. These 3 words suddenly entered Gu Yuechen's eyes. He had actually made this woman take birth control pills. And he had taken them more than once. Did she really not want to get pregnant with his child? She kept her belly to give birth to Baiyi's child. Great, great. This woman is really great. When Shuyi felt that the air pressure in the room had dropped significantly, she looked at Gu Yuechen cautiously. There was not much expression on his face, so he should not be angry, right? You're right. A woman like you is not worthy of bearing a child from my Gu family. I need to get a few more bottles of this medicine. How can this one be enough? If you take 1 pill at a time, it won't be enough, right? When Shuyi endured the sharp pain in her heart and said, it's clearly written on it, 1 pill at a time is enough, Before she could finish the rest of her words, Gu Yuechen suddenly pinched her chin and poured all the pills in the bottle into her mouth. In the end, he still felt it was not enough, so he stuffed the pills in Wen Shuyi's hand into her mouth as well. Cough cough. Wen Shuyi struggled violently and swallowed a few pills in a panic. She immediately dug her throat to spit them out. This medicine was very harmful to the body, and she had to take it because she didn't want to do more harm to her body. Gu Yuechen walked up to her with a gloomy face, his eyes showing the calm before the storm. What? Are you just pretending to show me? Why didn't you eat when I actually asked you to? When Shuyi shrank her body and looked at Gu Yuechen in fear, afraid that he would do something to her again. 1 is enough. Eating too much will harm your body. So, you still want to give birth to a child for Baiyi. Chapter 14, Eliminating Harm for the People. When Shuyi opened her mouth and wanted to explain, but in the end she had to give up. Forget it, he wouldn't believe it. She had said countless times that she and Senior Baiyi were not in that kind of relationship, but he never believed it. What Gu Yuechen always believed in were his own guesses and the words of others, and he had never trusted his wife, with whom he had lived for many years. Unexpectedly, Wen Shuyi's silence became a tacit consent in Gu Yuechen's eyes. A storm was brewing in his dark eyes. He stared at Wen Shuyi, wishing to tear this woman into pieces. She sits on the position of the young lady of the Gu family, but her heart is filled with another man, and she even wants to give birth to a child for that other man. How dare she treat him like this, Gu Yuechen? Suddenly, Gu Yuechen grabbed Wen Shuyi's neck, his nails digging into her flesh. Wen Shuyi, you are the first person who blatantly put a hat on me. You must have forgotten that your sickly brother is still in my hands. If I am unhappy and tell my men to do something, will he still be able to survive? Gu Yuechen, you are despicable and shameless. You are a grown man after all, why do you resort to such despicable tricks every day? If you don't like me, just kill me directly if you have the guts. I think you are a coward for threatening me. Wen Shuyi's eyes were red as she stared at Gu Yuechen. How could she have been so blind to fall in love with such a man? If she had a chance to do it again, she would never fall into the gentle trap set by this man. Coward? Am I a coward? Have you never seen anything in bed? Wen Shuyi, I warn you, put away your rebelliousness. You will always owe me, so do you think you have the right to lose your temper with me? Gu Yuechen pulled Wen Shuyi over. They were very close to each other. Wen Shuyi could see every emotion in his eyes. He hated her, and there was nothing else in his eyes. Wen Shuyi was thrown to the ground like a rag. She coughed a few times, and after calming down, she went downstairs as if nothing had happened and sat down next to Liu Yuhua. Shuyi, what did you go get? What took you so long? Hey, why is your neck red? Did that Brett Yuchen bully you behind my back? Liu Yuhua liked Wen Shuyi very much. When she saw her injured, she didn't care that the TV was showing her favorite baby and immediately focused all her attention on Wen Shuyi. Wen Shuyi felt a surge of warmth in her heart, but she didn't want Liu Yuhua to worry, so she forced a smile and said, "No, he doesn't dare to bully me because Grandma is here. I just felt uncomfortable in my stomach, so I went to the toilet upstairs before coming down." Really? Liu Yuhua didn't quite believe what Wen Shuyi said. This time, she clearly felt that something was wrong between the two of them. They were so harmonious before, but now there seemed to be a chasm between them. When have I ever lied to Grandma? Okay, Grandma, watch TV for a while. I'll take you to see a doctor in the afternoon for another comprehensive checkup. Wen Shuyi said seriously. After all, Liu Yuhua is old, and a minor illness may lead to irreversible consequences, so we must pay attention to it. Liu Yuhua held Wen Shuyi's hand and smiled contentedly. Okay, Grandma, listen to Shuyi. Shuyi cares about Grandma the most. The matter of the contraceptive pills seemed to have angered Gu Yuechen. He did not come out for lunch and ask the servant to bring the food to the study. This was a good thing for Wen Shuyi. She no longer had to face Gu Yuechen and listen to his cold words. Her miserable life became a little better. I took Liu Yuhua to the hospital. Because they had made an appointment in advance, they could go in as soon as they arrived. After a series of examinations and seeing the serious expression of the doctor, Liu Yuhua was a little scared. She grabbed Wen Shuyi's hand with a little force. Wen Shuyi gently comforted her. Grandma, don't be afraid, it's okay, we'll just make the situation more specific this time, and nothing will happen. Having said that, Wen Shuyi herself was nervous. If anything happened to Liu Yuhua, she would be heartbroken. Liu Yuhua was one of the few people who treated her well. You don't have to be so nervous. The problem is not that serious. Take some medication for a while and have a good rest. Then come back to the hospital for a checkup to see how the situation is and then formulate a new treatment plan. The two of them felt relieved. Wen Shuyi helped Liu Yuhua up with a smile on her face. Thank you, doctor. Should we go get the medicine now? At this time, the doctor wearing gold-rimmed glasses and a white coat put down the list in his hand and looked straight at Wen Shuyi. This look made her breath stop and her heart beat fast. She felt like she was seen through. I see that you don't look well. I suggest you get a comprehensive checkup. Don't act like a fool just because you are young. Your health always comes first. Wen Shuyi was really scared after 2 previous miscarriages. She didn't want to lie on the cold bed again. She was afraid that she would remember what happened before. Doctor, I know my own body well. There's no need for a checkup. The doctor didn't listen to Wen Shuyi's refusal at all. He wrote a prescription and handed it to her. Since you are here, just do a checkup. Here is the prescription. Go ahead. Liu Yuhua thought the doctor was right and nodded in agreement. Shuyi, I think the doctor is right. You really don't look very well. Why don't you just listen and do it? Grandma will be with you, so don't be afraid. Unable to persuade the two, Wen Shuyi went for a checkup. Before she lay on the cold machine, all her previous experiences began to emerge in her mind. She clenched her fingers and tensed her body. However, the most taboo thing during an examination is to be nervous. When Wen Shuyi was undergoing a gynecological examination, she was hurt and she gasped. Relax, don't be nervous. The doctor soothed her gently, asking her to take a deep breath while doing the things at hand. After a simple examination, Wen Shuyi was sweating profusely. The doctor couldn't help but look at her a few more times. Soon, the examination report came out, and Wen Shuyi found the male doctor. The hospital office was so small, and there were quite a few medical records. This small space made Liu Yuhua feel uncomfortable. Shuyi, Grandma feels stuffy in here. I'll wait for you outside. Wen Shuyi nodded. Okay, then grandma, don't wander around, just wait for me at the door. Liu Yuhua was amused and patted her hands. Grandma is not a child. Nothing will happen to her. You talk to the doctor first. Be sure to tell grandma if anything happens. After Liu Yuhua left, the male doctor looked at Wen Shuyi and said, please close the door. The old lady is old, don't let her worry about you. Besides, this is your privacy, you should really talk behind closed doors. Wen Shuyi nodded, and a bad feeling arose in her heart. The male doctor was so serious, so there must be something wrong with her body. The male doctor looked at the report with a heavy face, then raised his eyes to look at Wen Shuyi. Don't take birth control pills in the future. If you take them again, you will never be a mother again in this life. She couldn't take birth control pills, so what should she do if Gu Yuechen forced her to do it? That man always cared about his own happiness and never cared about her life or death, so it was impossible for him to take safety measures. Wen Shuyi felt very ashamed, but she still had to ask, then doctor, if you don't take birth control pills, are there any other contraceptive methods? The male doctor frowned, his tone filled with anger. He felt ashamed for such a scum among men. When asking men to wear condoms, men should at least have some sense of responsibility, right? How can you abuse a woman's body like this? Wen Shuyi opened her mouth, hesitated for a long time, and continued to ask, then is there any contraceptive method here, for example, wearing an IUD? Can I do it? This is the only way. Having an IUD is very painful, but Wen Shuyi doesn't want to take birth control pills anymore. She still plans to be a mother in this life. Seeing Wen Shuyi hesitant and as if she had something to hide, the male doctor did not ask any more questions. After all, this was the patient's privacy. It's okay to wear an IUD. Please make an appointment and come tomorrow. Wen Shuyi breathed a sigh of relief, and the big stone in her heart was finally put down. At that moment, getting an IUD was undoubtedly the best choice for her. She smiled gratefully at the male doctor. After all, if he hadn't insisted on letting her do the examination, she would have continued to take birth control pills until she couldn't get pregnant. Okay, thank you, doctor. Wen Shuyi was very beautiful, with skin that was as smooth as a baby's without makeup, and a pair of eyes that were so big and captivating. Her eyelashes were long and flickered as she blinked, like the most beautiful butterfly. The male doctor was a normal man, so how could he resist her smile like that? He couldn't help but blush. At this moment, Liu Yuhua's voice suddenly came, Yuchen, why are you here? Don't you have something to do at the company? The next second, the door was pushed open, and Gu Yuechen's slender figure fell into Wen Shuyi's eyes. The smile on her face had not yet faded. In Gu Yuechen's eyes, this was tantamount to her fawning on the male doctor. Suddenly, his face darkened. Wen Shuyi knew that he had misunderstood again. He must have thought that she had deliberately sent her grandmother away and chatted with the male doctor alone in the room. The male doctor looked at Gu Yuechen, then at Wen Shuyi, and could guess the relationship between the two. It just so happened that he wanted to say something about this man's irresponsible behavior. The male doctor pushed his glasses and said, hello, my name is Li Xianyan, I'm a doctor in this hospital. You should be Ms. Wen's boyfriend, right? Logically speaking, I shouldn't get involved in your affairs, but as a man, I think you should take some responsibility. You can't just care about your own happiness and let Ms. Wen take birth control pills. Do you know that if she continues to take them, she will never be a mother in this life? Wen Shuyi kept hinting to Li Xianyan with her eyes not to say anything. Telling Gu Yuechen about her dire situation would only make him happy. As expected, after hearing what Li Xianyan said, Gu Yuechen grinned like a devil from hell, can't be a mother. Then she should eat more. After all, a disgusting woman like her will not give birth to a good child. Should I be considered as getting rid of harm to the people? Chapter 15, You should live in pain. As soon as these words were spoken, Li Xiangyang immediately realized that something was wrong. He frowned and looked between the two of them with a puzzled look. Wen Shuyi lowered her head, wishing she could find a hole to crawl into. Humiliating her in front of outsiders was Gu Yuechen's favorite thing to do. He wanted to tell everyone in the world about her false charges and make everyone despise her. Taking a deep breath, Wen Shuyi forced a smile at Li Xianyan, thank you, doctor. Please make an appointment for me tomorrow. I will come to get the IUD tomorrow. Now that everything was said out in the open, she didn't bother to hide it anymore. After saying this, she passed by Gu Yuechen and was about to leave, but he stopped her. Gu Yuechen looked at her coldly, with something other than disgust in his eyes. Wen Shuyi couldn't understand. I agreed to this. Wen Shuyi, you are at best my appendage. Do you think you don't need my consent to do anything? Wen Shuyi clenched her fingers, glared at Gu Yuechen and fought back. So what? You want to threaten me with my brother again? Gu Yuechen, your body is mine, and I have an obligation to take responsibility. Wearing an IUD is good for both of us. After all, you don't want me to get pregnant with your child because I can't take birth control pills, right? And you can't keep me imprisoned by your side forever. Soon, Bai Yi already had news about her brother, and it wouldn't be long before she could escape from this sea of suffering. For a lifetime. Hearing this word, Gu Yuechen frowned, and a strange feeling rose in his heart. The improper relationship between Wen Shuyi and Bai Yi showed that they would definitely live together in the future. This was clearly the result he expected, but when he thought of this possibility, why did he feel so uncomfortable? Uncomfortable? Oh, he was unhappy. He was unhappy that this woman, wearing the title of Gu family's young lady, cheated on him. He didn't care about this woman. Suddenly, Gu Yuechen grabbed Wen Shuyi's wrist and said viciously. He didn't know whether these words were for himself or for her. Wen Shuyi, it is my misfortune that a disgusting woman like you is pregnant with my child. As for a lifetime, you really think about it. Do you think you can stay in this position of the young lady of the Gu family for a lifetime? Wen Shuyi pulled her hand back and burst into tears. I don't want to get pregnant with your child, and I don't want to be the young lady of the Gu family forever. Gu Yuechen, I have been wishful thinking all these years and spent my youth on you, but I have come to my senses now. After she came to her senses, she tried to escape more than once, but Gu Yuechen, who felt that there was no fabricated relationship between him and Bai Yi, kept threatening her with his brother to force her to do things she didn't want to do, and he even called it fulfilling her duties as Mrs. Gu. Hearing the noise, Liu Yuhua ignored his physical discomfort and immediately walked in, blocking Wen Shuyi. Yuechen, what are you doing, you little brat? You bully Shuyi as soon as you come here, look how angry she is. Liu Yuhua didn't know what happened, but when she saw Wen Shuyi's red eyes, she pushed all the responsibility onto Gu Yuechen. Wen Shuyi pulled the corners of her mouth with difficulty, but she couldn't smile. She supported Liu Yuhua and passed by Gu Yuechen and left. Grandma, I'm fine. You must be tired. Let's go home first. There were only 2 grown men left in the office. Li Xiangyang looked at Gu Yuechen inquiringly. As a man, he could tell at once that Gu Yuechen liked Wen Shuyi, but he didn't understand how a person's reaction arc could be so long. He clearly liked her, but he had to push her away with words. Feeling Li Xiangyang's gaze, Gu Yuechen turned his head and looked over. He stretched out his hand and supported himself on the desk, giving Li Xiangyang a strong sense of oppression. I warn you, put away your little thoughts, otherwise I will make sure you don't get a job. The atmosphere on their way back was particularly weird. Gu Yuechen sat in the passenger seat, Wen Shuyi and Liu Yuhua sat in the back. After a series of inspections, Liu Yuhua was already exhausted and fell asleep soon after getting in the car. Wen Shuyi turned her head to look out the window, feeling extremely uncomfortable. She felt that Gu Yuechen was looking at her intentionally or unintentionally. She clenched her fingers and forced herself to keep a straight face. In her heart, she was screaming madly. She wanted to escape quickly, and never be found by the devil Gu Yuechen again. Liu Yuhua slept for a while and got up to eat dinner. When Shuyi handed her medicine according to the doctor's request, Grandma, take the medicine. You will be fine after taking it. Liu Yuhua frowned and didn't want to take the medicine. Shuyi, can I not take the medicine? I have been taking these medicines for a long time, and they don't seem to be of any use. Liu Yuhua was as cute as a child. When Shuyi couldn't help but soften her voice and used the trick she used to coax a child, how can it be useless? It must be useful. Grandma, Dr. Li specifically told me to urge you to take the medicine on time, otherwise he will blame me next time you go for a checkup. Liu Yuhua didn't want to embarrass Wen Shuyi, so she compromised and took the pill. She felt sleepy after taking the pill, so she asked Sister Liu to help her go upstairs. Okay, then I'll listen to Shuyi. When Shuyi followed him upstairs, she didn't want to stay downstairs with Gu Yuechen. With the previous experience in mind, this time when Shuyi planned to lock the door when she returned to her room. She didn't want to see Gu Yuechen's face again after taking a shower. However, before she could close the door, it was kicked open with great force. Wen Shuyi took several steps back before she could stand firm. Gu Yuechen came again. When they were downstairs, she could feel Gu Yuechen's forbearance. He was very angry with her, but Wen Shuyi didn't want to bear it and tried to avoid it whenever possible. But this was Gu Yuechen, and she had nowhere to hide. Wen Shuyi didn't argue with him, picked up her pajamas and was about to go into the bathroom, but was stopped by Gu Yuechen's words, "Your sickly brother can only lie in bed every day and can't go anywhere. As his sister, are you going to take his share for him?" Wen Shuyi turned around and looked at him coldly. "Gu Yuechen, just say what you want to say, don't be sarcastic. Tomorrow, Dr. Li will put an IUD in you, right? TSK, you think it's glorious to let another man put his hand inside you? You two should have sex once before putting the IUD in." "Dr. Li," this woman called out so intimately so quickly, "the relationship between the two is not simple. This woman is really not an easy one to deal with. One Bai Yi is not enough, and now there is another Li Xianyan. How many hats does she have to put on his head before she is satisfied?" Wen Shuyi closed her eyes in grief. Her heart ached so much. Gu Yuechen's words cut into her heart like a knife. "You, Gu Yuechen, what you think is not the only thing between men and women. Dr. Li and I are innocent. I know you won't believe me even if I tell you. So, think whatever you want." Seeing Wen Shuyi's anger, Gu Yuechen's depressed mood improved a little. He sat lazily on the bed, his long legs casually folded and dangling. He looked lazy, yet fatally attractive. "Of course I can think whatever I want, but I don't know if your sickly brother can be so happy." Wen Shuyi clutched her pajamas tightly and stared at Gu Yuechen. She hated him so much, really hated him. She hated Gu Yuechen's power and his coldness. How could he use other people's weaknesses to hurt them again and again? How could he ignore their previous warm past and push her directly into the position of the enemy? Could it be that everything in the past was just a dream of hers? This Gu Yuechen who hated her to the core and wished she would die, was this the reality? Wen Shuyi's tense body relaxed, like a deflated balloon, with her head lowered. Her words were a compromise, but Gu Yuechen still caught the stubbornness in her tone. "Gu Yuechen, I'm tired. Tell me, what do you want from me?" Finally, Gu Yuechen told his purpose. When he thought of the way the doctor looked at Wen Shuyi today, he wanted to poke out the man's eyes. He also did not allow the woman to agree to the doctor's suggestion. "I don't agree with you getting an IUD." Wen Shuyi looked up with disbelief in her eyes, which eventually turned into anger, and then slowly turned into despair. She understood that what Gu Yuechen was going to do was exactly the same as what he had said in the hospital today. He wanted her to take birth control pills until she could not have children. He wanted to use this cruel method to erase her right to be a mother. It was cruel, too cruel, but what could she do? Now she had no choice but to endure and wait. Seeing that she didn't say anything, Gu Yuechen smiled with satisfaction. He stood up, walked closer and patted her face again and again, his eyes still arrogant. "Wen Shuyi, you know your situation. You have no right to resist my decision. If I hadn't seen you taking birth control pills today, I wouldn't have known that you are so sensible." It was clearly a compliment, but Wen Shuyi only heard sarcasm, and Gu Yuechen felt very uncomfortable. He should be happy, but he couldn't be happy. When he saw this woman taking birth control pills today, he wanted to kill her. The next second, Wen Shuyi was like a broken rag doll, and was gently pushed onto the bed by Gu Yuechen. He rudely tore off her clothes, with a hint of amusement on his face. "After this is over, you should know what you have to do." Wen Shuyi looked at him mechanically and suddenly smiled. "Of course, take birth control pills. Gu Yuechen, don't worry, I've been stupid twice, I won't be stupid again. I can't let myself get pregnant with your child again." A blessing in disguise. Wen Shuyi felt that she finally understood the profound meaning of this sentence at this moment. The departure of those two children was not without reason. What if they gave birth in the end? Gu Yuechen would not love them. Living in a family without love is worse than not coming. Gu Yuechen pinched Wen Shuyi's chin, feeling that she was putting the blame on him again. He was so angry. "Wen Shuyi, you are still quibbling after all this. It's God's will that you can't give birth to Bai Yi's child. Now you are about to lose your right to be a mother, and this is what you deserve. You are such a disgusting woman who will do anything to achieve your goals. You should live in pain." Chapter 16. Don't blame him for being rude. A disgusting woman like her should live in such pain. This sentence echoed in Wen Shuyi's ears for a long time. Gu Yuechen said a lot of unpleasant words afterwards, but she couldn't hear them. Gu Yuechen tortured her to the best of his ability, and when he saw her frowning in pain, he smiled happily. Wen Shuyi looked at the face in front of her, feeling familiar yet unfamiliar. She didn't remember how long Gu Yuechen had been struggling. She only remembered that when Gu Yuechen asked her to get up early in the morning to take care of Liu Yuhua, she heard it, but her eyelids were so heavy that she couldn't open them. Later, Gu Yuechen gave up. Then, there was another crackling sound, and she felt cold liquid being pushed into her body. Her hot body felt much better, and when she woke up again, he was already next to her. Wen Shuyi opened her eyes and saw Liu Yuhua's worried face. "Shuyi, you finally woke up. How do you feel? Are you still feeling uncomfortable? Why did you suddenly have a fever?" Wen Shuyi struggled to sit up, but was pushed down by Liu Yuhua. She simply lay down. She just wanted to lie down and rest after being tossed around a lot last night. "I don't know why I suddenly got sick." "Grandma, did you take the medicine on time?" "You must be obedient and take it on time. Liu Yuhua's condition is relatively serious. If she doesn't cooperate with the treatment, the consequences will be disastrous." In fact, when talking with the doctor yesterday, Wen Shuyi knew that surgery was inevitable, and taking medicine now is also a preparation. Liu Yuhua looked at Wen Shuyi distressedly, and truly felt her concern. "You are such a child, but you still think of me. Don't worry, I will take the medicine well as you have told me. If you don't believe me, ask Sister Liu." Wen Shuyi was not polite either. She turned to look at Mrs. Liu, and her eyes were really asking if Liu Yuhua had taken the medicine. Mrs. Liu was amused. "Miss Wen, don't worry. The old lady took the medicine well. The most important thing now is your health. You have to get better soon." Wen Shuyi's heart was relieved. She said lazily, "I know. I will get better soon. I'm a little hungry. Sister Liu, can you cook me some porridge?" Being sick, he couldn't eat heavy food, but he couldn't stand being hungry either. Liu Yuhua and Sister Liu had already thought of this. "It's hot down there. I'll bring it to you right away." Wen Shuyi knew that Sister Liu treated her well because of Liu Yuhua, and she could accept it as long as she felt loved. "Thank you, Sister Liu." After drinking the porridge, Wen Shuyi wanted to be alone. She half lay on the bed, looking at the birds flying freely outside, feeling extremely envious. She was obviously free and could go out if she wanted to, but an invisible prison was suffocating her. Wen Shuyi sighed softly. She thought of something, opened the drawer and found the pills inside, but she didn't put them into her mouth. Wen Shuyi thought about what Li Xiangyang said and finally put the pill back. She didn't want to take birth control pills anymore. She wanted to be a mother in the future, so even though Gu Yuechen disagreed, she had to get an IUD. She was unwilling to pay such a huge price to deal with Gu Yuechen. At this moment, the door was pushed open and Gu Yuechen appeared. He looked at Wen Shuyi with deep eyes, then at the drawer, thinking that Wen Shuyi had taken the medicine, and smiled. "Sure enough, she is sensible and knows what to do." Gu Yuechen's tone was like praising a puppy who had just learned to pick up things. Wen Shuyi didn't like it very much. When she thought of him saying that she was his appendage, she became even angrier. Turning her head, Wen Shuyi didn't look at Gu Yuechen, out of sight, out of mind. Then, she felt the bed sink and Gu Yuechen sat down beside the bed. Wen Shuyi was inexplicably scared. Gu Yuechen would do anything to make himself happy. Even though she had a fever now, he would do it as long as he wanted. Wen Shuyi's dodge did not escape Gu Yuechen's eyes. He narrowed his eyes slightly, feeling unhappy. Is this woman hiding from him? Oh, if this were Bai Yi, or that Dr. Li, she would probably beg others to touch her, right? What a scheming woman. After a long while, Gu Yuechen spoke calmly with an unquestionable tone. "Shenran is here, vacate your room and let her stay." Wen Shuyi turned her head and looked at Gu Yuechen in disbelief. There were so many rooms in the Gu family, and if Lu Shenran wanted to stay overnight, she could stay anywhere, but she had to stay in her room. If it was any other time, Wen Shuyi would not bother to care, but it happened when she was sick. Seeing her stunned expression, Gu Yuechen smiled triumphantly, and Wen Shuyi suddenly realized that he was deliberately tormenting her. Wen Shuyi was feeling lazy and had no strength. She was also sick and her mind was dizzy. She accidentally lost control and said to Gu Yuechen, "The Gu family has become increasingly destitute since you took over. Now the Gu family can't even afford to open guest rooms for guests to rest." Gu Yuechen's eyes darkened, annoyed by this woman's counterattack. He lifted Wen Shuyi's chin and said, "When is it your turn to point fingers at what I want to do? Besides, if the Gu family is really in trouble, then we have to thank you, Miss Wen." What Gu Yuechen was talking about was, of course, the Wen family asking the Gu family for resources. Wen Shuyi was powerless to resist. She pulled back her chin and nodded, "Yes, you are the head of the Gu family. You have the final say in everything in the Gu family. Whatever you want, I'll move, okay?" Wen Shuyi pulled out the needle and got out of bed from the other side. She was so angry and furious that she lost her balance and fell heavily to the ground. Wen Shuyi endured the pain, got up and walked towards the door. "As soon as I left the room, I heard Lu Xinran and Liu Yuhua talking and laughing downstairs. Xinran, grandma is fine. If you have something to do, just take care of your own business. There's no need to make a special trip." Lu Xinran smiled at Liu Yuhua in a flattering manner, as if she really cared about him. "Grandma, I'm fine. I was so worried about you that I couldn't wait to come and see you." Wen Shuyi stood at the stairs and watched, not caring about the wound on the back of her hand. As if she felt her gaze, Lu Xinran turned his head and looked at her provocatively. Wen Shuyi took a step and began to feel dizzy again. At this time, Gu Yuechen also came out of the room. When he passed by her, he bumped her with his shoulder, not knowing whether it was intentional or not, and Wen Shuyi rolled down. Wen Shuyi only felt her body lose weight, and then fell heavily to the ground. Pain came from many parts of her body, making her unable to tell where it hurt for a while. She opened her eyes with difficulty, but all she saw was red. She touched her forehead and saw the blood on her fingers, then she was sure that, yes, she was bleeding. She fell down the stairs and was bleeding. Afterwards, Wen Shuyi lost consciousness. When she woke up again, the smell of disinfectant kept coming into her nose. She opened her eyes uncomfortably. She was the only one in the room. After coughing a few times, she began to breathe violently. Her breath was so hot that Wen Shuyi touched her forehead, and her hand immediately bounced away the next second, both because of the scorching temperature and the pain of the wound. The door was pushed open, and Liu Yuhua walked in with Gu Yuechen and Lu Xinran. The two walked side by side, looking so well matched, like a couple made in heaven. Wen Shuyi felt heartbroken, perhaps because this scene was too beautiful, or perhaps because, standing next to Gu Yuechen was beyond her reach. As she watched, she relaxed. Liu Yuhua was so angry that she slapped her thighs repeatedly. "Shuyi, how are you? Are you still in pain? I am so angry. Yuechen is such a bad boy. How could he bump into you when you were going downstairs? You are so weak, he should have stayed away." Liu Yuhua's voice was a little loud, causing Wen Shuyi's ears to hurt. "Grandma, I'm fine. What did the doctor say? Is my condition serious?" If possible, Wen Shuyi wanted to stay in the hospital for a few more days. She wanted to take this opportunity to get an IUD. Gu Yuechen would go to the company during the day, so she could do it without him knowing. "It's a bit serious. I'll have you stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. You're such an unlucky kid. First you had a fever for no apparent reason, and then you were knocked down the stairs. Really?" While speaking, Liu Yuhua glared at Gu Yuechen several times, wishing that the person lying on the bed was him. Wen Shuyi nodded and thought about other things. Gu Yuechen stared at Wen Shuyi closely, looking her up and down. He heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that she had no extra injuries. At this time, Wen Shuyi looked at him dully. Gu Yuechen immediately turned his head away. He didn't expect that this woman was made of paper and would fall down at the slightest touch. However, it seemed that he had indeed gone too far. Gu Yuechen looked at Wen Shuyi with complicated eyes, but Wen Shuyi just let out an "R" in a daze, not hearing what Liu Yuhua had just said. Just then, there was a sound of footsteps, and Li Xiangyang came in with a nurse to check on the patient. "Miss Wen, how are you feeling? Are you feeling better?" Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room changed. The guilt in Gu Yuechen's heart disappeared completely, and his face turned extremely dark. The reason why he asked Wen Shuyi to have him for drip at home when she had a fever was because he didn't want to see this man, but he didn't expect to meet him in the end. Li Xiangyang looked at her with worry in his eyes, a normal look of concern for a patient. Wen Shuyi relaxed a little. I feel a little dizzy, and the wound hurts a little. Doctor, how long will I have to stay here? Hearing her ask this, Li Xianyang frowned, thinking that she wanted to be discharged from the hospital, and couldn't help but scold her. At least 3 days, what? Are you really not going to keep your body, and you're still thinking about being discharged from the hospital? No, I just asked. Thank you, doctor. At least 3 days. She only needs 1 afternoon. Thinking of this, Wen Shuyi's eyes deepened. She raised her eyes and looked at Gu Yuechen inadvertently. She found that he was staring at her, as if he wanted to kill her with his eyes. Wen Shuyi was speechless. Wasn't it because of him that she could come to the hospital? And yet he acted like he had figured it out. It was really outrageous. Li Xianyang took out the thermometer and began to measure Wen Shuyi's temperature. He did it in a routine manner with a blank expression, not as casual as he was in the office. I'll check you. If you feel uncomfortable, tell me immediately. Gu Yuechen's brows were getting tighter and tighter. He watched Li Xianyang touching Wen Shuyi's head and taking her temperature. He wished he could chop off his hands. As a man, he could tell at a glance what Li Xianyang was thinking of Wen Shuyi. It seems that his previous warning is useless. This poor doctor is really bold and dares to come close to me, so don't blame him for being rude. Chapter 17 Anesthesia is the safest. Wen Shuyi said thank you to Li Xianyang out of politeness. The next second, she felt that Gu Yuechen was even angrier. Thank you, doctor. Wen Shuyi didn't understand why Gu Yuechen was angry. Because she was his accessory, so she couldn't be with any other man besides him. But he clearly had no feelings for her, no feelings. Why did he have these possessive desires? Didn't he feel tired? Li Xianyang nodded, looking at Gu Yuechen and Lu Xinran intentionally or unintentionally. He seemed to understand the complexity of the relationship between the three of them. As I should, I'll leave first if there's nothing else. After Li Xianyang left, Liu Yuhua patted Wen Shuyi's hand and said gently, Shuyi, you have to listen to the doctor. If you feel uncomfortable, tell me in time. You can't bear it alone. Do you hear me? With Liu Yuhua around, Wen Shuyi's situation was not so embarrassing. Grandma, I'm so obedient, unlike you, who needs someone to watch over you even when you take medicine. Liu Yuhua was amused. She said a little embarrassedly, no, I know how to take medicine properly, okay. The two of them get along really well, and the emotions they express are sincere, which is different from Lu Xinran's attitude towards Liu Yuhua. Lu Xinran was unhappy. Wen Shuyi had been sticking to Gu Yuechen all these years, wasn't it just because she had coaxed the old lady? Oh, the old lady is confused and can't see through Wen Shuyi, but she is not stupid. Lu Xinran's acting skills in the crew are not very good, but when she is provoking trouble, her acting skills are excellent. She blinked her eyes and looked curious. Shuyi, did you know that doctor before? I think he cares about you very much. The sentence, he seems to care about you so much, is pushing Wen Shuyi into the fire pit. All the gossips about Wen Shuyi and Bai Yi on the internet were inevitably fueled by Lu Xinran. Lu Xinran also knew the reason for the conflict between Wen Shuyi and Gu Yuechen. What she was doing now could be regarded as a repetition of the same old trick. Wen Shuyi's face turned cold, and she couldn't help but ask, isn't it normal for a doctor to care about his patients? Dr. Li is conscientious and responsible, which shows that he is a good doctor. A dirty person sees everything as dirty. Lu Xinran, I advise you to wash your eyes more often when you have time. Wen Shuyi's anger was seen by others as a guilty conscience. Lu Xinran secretly glanced at Gu Yuechen and saw that his face had turned dark. The effect was achieved. Lu Xinran stuck out her tongue like a white lotus, thinking she was playful and cute, but she almost disgusted Wen Shuyi to death. I just asked casually, Shuyi, please don't be so excited, okay? It's easy to cause misunderstandings. Wen Shuyi had a headache. She had a wound on her head, and Lu Xinran was deliberately making trouble for her. When she got emotional, the wound was easily agitated, causing her great pain. Not wanting to deal with these two people anymore, Wen Shuyi lay down and said, I'm tired, you guys go out, I want to rest for a while. Liu Yuhua noticed that the atmosphere was not right, but she pretended not to know. She stood up and said, okay, then Shuyi, you have a good rest. We will leave first. Yuchen, let's go. Liu Yuhua looked at Lu Xinran meaningfully. She saw through the child's thoughts at a glance. Naturally, the trick Lu Xinran just used could not be hidden from her. However, as an elder, she didn't need to argue with a junior. Watching the three people leave, Wen Shuyi let out a sigh of relief. She would contact Li Xiangyang about the IUD, but she couldn't let Gu Yuechen find out, so she had to find someone to help. Wen Shuyi got up quietly and slowly opened the drawer. While controlling the volume, she looked towards the door, fearing that someone would suddenly come in and find a pen and paper inside to write down a few words. After doing all this, she put the paper in her pocket, and her tense body relaxed slightly. Soon, she couldn't help laughing, not because what she wanted was about to be achieved, but because she felt sad. At the beginning, because I liked Gu Yuechen, I was full of passion and married him regardless of the consequences. I knew that he had no feelings for me, but I insisted that I could move him. In the end, I was the only one who was moved. Now, she has even fallen to the level of a mistress with an arrogant face, and she doesn't even have the most basic control over her own body. She just wants to get an IUD, but she can't even do such a simple thing. Wen Shuyi felt bitter in her heart and her headache grew the more she thought about it. As she thought about it, she fell asleep in a daze. When she woke up again, it was already bright outside. Liu Yuhua personally brought her breakfast. Wen Shuyi took it and said, "Grandma, you can just ask someone else to do these things. Don't do it yourself. You are not in good health. You should have a good rest. Grandma is fine. I just wanted to come to the hospital to accompany you. Shuyi, it's Grandma's fault. I didn't protect you well, so you got hurt." When Shuyi felt a pain in her heart and her nose couldn't help but feel sore. She could endure no matter how difficult it was for her to get along with Gu Yuechen before, but now Liu Yuhua's guilty words made her almost burst into tears. "Grandma, don't think too much. My injury has nothing to do with you." When Shuyi lowered her head and looked at the breakfast quietly, but she had no idea what it tasted like. It didn't matter, it would be over soon. Once Bai Yi rescued his brother, everything would be over. Now, these few words are the only things that can keep Wen Shuyi alive every day. She doesn't want to think about the rest, and she dare not think about it. Wen Shuyi put down the incubator and said, "Grandma, I'll take you to see Dr. Li for a checkup to see how your medication is going." Wen Shuyi clenched her fingers and looked at Liu Yuhua nervously. She really felt her grandmother's love, but her affairs with Gu Yuechen were too complicated and she didn't want to involve her grandmother. Liu Yuhua nodded without any doubt. "Okay, Grandma will go. I will do whatever Shuyi says, but Grandma can do it alone. You, just lie in bed and have a good rest. You have to recover from your injury." As expected, when Shuyi nodded, "Okay, Grandma, no matter what the doctor says to you, you have to tell me everything so that I can understand your condition in time, okay?" Liu Yuhua was amused again and looked at Wen Shuyi gently. "I know, I'm not a child, I won't make you worry so much." Liu Yuhua went for a checkup, and Wen Shuyi was the only one left in the room. She lay down for a while, but couldn't stand it any longer, so she got up immediately. It would take a while for Liu Yuhua to do the examination, so Wen Shuyi wanted to take advantage of this time to get something done. When getting out of bed, Wen Shuyi was in a hurry and almost fell to the ground. She supported herself on the bedside table and managed to stand steadily. She stumbled to Li Xiangyang's office. Her sudden appearance made Li Xiangyang frown in confusion. "Why did you get out of bed? In your current condition, you should be lying in bed." Wen Shuyi didn't care about that. There was only one thing on her mind now. "Dr. Li, help me. Can you arrange an IUD surgery for me now? I want it done right now." Li Xiangyang vaguely guessed what was going on between her and Gu Yuechen, so he didn't ask any more questions and said truthfully, "No, you are very weak right now. Although having an IUD is just a minor operation, I still have to be responsible for you. Dr. Li, please help me, please. If I don't do it now, I don't know if I can do it next time." As soon as she recovered from her illness, Gu Yuechen would torture her. If she didn't eat, she would probably get pregnant, and if she ate, she would probably not be able to be a mother in the future. No matter what the consequences are, Wen Shuyi cannot accept them. Now, having an IUD surgery is her only option. Li Xiangyang hesitated. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head and refused, "No, no." As time passed, Wen Shuyi became more and more anxious. For a moment, she didn't think too much and directly grabbed Li Xiangyang's hand and begged, "Dr. Li, please, I can sign the agreement. No matter what the consequences are, I will bear them myself." Having an IUD is indeed a minor operation and is generally not life-threatening, but Wen Shuyi's current situation is indeed special. But if God was determined to play a joke on her and let her get into trouble, she would accept it. Seeing Wen Shuyi's firm attitude and her special situation, Li Xiangyang softened his heart and agreed, "Okay, I'll have someone arrange it for you now." Wen Shuyi smiled, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, Dr. Li. Also, I'd like to trouble you to keep this matter confidential for me." Li Xiangyang sat down and wrote the order. Without even looking up, he said, "Of course you should. Take the order to the obstetrics and gynecology department. I happen to have some friendship with this doctor. She will help you solve the problem." Wen Shuyi took the paper, but felt it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Okay, thank you, doctor." Wen Shuyi wasted some time because of the tussle with Li Xiangyang. She was in a hurry to go out and almost bumped into someone. She endured the dizziness and held onto the wall to keep herself steady. Looking up, Wen Shuyi saw a familiar figure in the crowd, Gu Yuechen. Wen Shuyi was immediately panicked. At this time, he should be in the company. Why did he suddenly come here? Wen Shuyi instinctively hid the list behind her. She was now in a dilemma. Wen Shuyi's ward is upstairs, Li Xiangyang's office is on the first floor, and Gu Yuechen is in front of her. Even if she rushes back now, she can't get back to the ward before Gu Yuechen. Gu Yuechen is very smart and he will definitely guess what she is going to do at the first moment, so if he doesn't do it this time, it will be even more impossible next time. However, it would take at least half an hour to perform an operation, administer anesthesia, and wait for her to wake up. Gu Yuechen couldn't see her in the ward, and half an hour was enough for him to turn the hospital upside down. The final result was that Gu Yuechen found her and asked her to remove the IUD. Wen Shuyi didn't want to fail. After thinking for a moment, Wen Shuyi made a decision. She walked towards the obstetrics and gynecology department with firm steps, found the doctor, and handed her the list. "Hello, I am a friend of Dr. Li. I am in a hurry. Please do the surgery for me now. No anesthesia is needed. Simple disinfection will be enough." Hearing her say this, the female doctor was a little shocked. No need for anesthesia. After all, this is about putting something into your body. In order to prevent you from feeling uncomfortable and moving around, anesthesia is the safest choice. Chapter 18. Shameless to this extent. Wen Shuyi is very beautiful. Although it is common for her to have an IUD, the female doctor couldn't help but look at her a few more times because of her face. Her eyes revealed something intentionally or unintentionally. Wen Shuyi didn't have time to argue with her. She grabbed the female doctor's hand with an anxious look on her face. "Doctor, please just do as I say. I really don't have time." The female doctor was frightened by Wen Shuyi, and then thought of what Li Xiangyang had told her. After simply cleaning and disinfecting her, she let her lie down. "Well, okay then." Before starting, the female doctor asked again, "Are you sure you don't want anesthesia? It's really uncomfortable, why don't you consider it?" Wen Shuyi clenched her fingers and nodded vigorously. "I'm sure it's not a problem, doctor, just come directly." She could endure Gu Yuechen's torture, let alone a small operation. The female doctor looked at Wen Shuyi with a complicated look. She had seen many strange things in this department, and Wen Shuyi's request was actually nothing. But the female doctor still felt it was a pity. Girls should take good care of themselves instead of doing things that hurt themselves. When the tool was inserted, Wen Shuyi's pupils dilated, her nails dug into her flesh, and her body tensed up. The doctor was in a tense state and could not continue the operation. "Ms. Wen, please relax. I know this is a little difficult for you, but it is difficult for me to operate in this state." Wen Shuyi let out a breath and forced herself to relax. "Wen Shuyi, come on, you just have to hold on. You will be free soon. Think about the future. You have to endure this little discomfort. 5 minutes for disinfection and 5 minutes for surgery." The matter was settled in 10 minutes. Wen Shuyi didn't feel uncomfortable when something suddenly appeared in her body. Instead, she felt very happy. With this, she didn't have to worry anymore. However, when she thought that Gu Yuechen was waiting for her in the ward, her mood instantly turned bad. Wen Shuyi got out of bed, put on her pants and was about to leave, but was stopped by the female doctor. "Hey, Miss Wen, don't move. You need to stay here for observation to see if there are any other problems." Wen Shuyi was very grateful for the help of the female doctor. "I can't stay, doctor. Please keep this matter confidential. Thank you. After she finished speaking, she pushed the door and went out without waiting for the female doctor to answer. To be honest, this operation still had some impact on her. When she was walking, she felt uncomfortable between her legs. Wen Shuyi returned to her floor and pushed the door open. The next second, her neck was strangled. Gu Yuechen had a dark face and pushed her against the door. He looked at her inquiringly, his tone was cold. Where have you been? Gu Yuechen thought that Wen Shuyi had gone to see Li Xiangyang, so he ran over specially. However, Li Xiangyang was consulting another patient. So, he thought of the obstetrics and gynecology department again, but he didn't see her. The hospital was so small, and there were only 2 places this woman could go. However, Gu Yuechen couldn't find her either, so it was hard for him not to be suspicious. Wen Shuyi felt dizzy. Gu Yuechen was really rude. Gu Yuechen, if you really don't like me, why don't you just kill me? First you pushed me down the stairs, and now you keep slamming me against the wall. There's no need to torture me like this. As she spoke, Wen Shuyi felt even more dizzy. She didn't want to hide it. She even wished she could faint on the spot so that she could avoid Gu Yuechen's questioning and have a good rest. However, God did not hear her wish. She was dizzy, but still conscious. As if afraid that she would really faint and unable to answer the question, Gu Yuechen pressed his fingers hard. Wen Shuyi, don't change the subject, answer my question. Wen Shuyi refused. She raised her eyes and looked at Gu Yuechen coldly. Although she looked pale and weak at the moment, it did not affect her mocking Gu Yuechen. Gu Yuechen, you are very powerful. You can just check where I go. Besides, I don't think you will believe what I say. If you don't believe it, why waste each other's time asking these questions, don't you think so? Gu Yuechen was speechless. Indeed, even if Wen Shuyi told him what she had just done, he would not believe it, because he had already determined that this restless woman must have done something behind his back. Thinking of this, Gu Yuechen pulled back his hand, and Wen Shuyi lost support and fell to the ground. She raised her head with difficulty, but couldn't lift it up. Finally, she fainted as she wished. The first thing Wen Shuyi did when she woke up was to check on Liu Yuhua's health. Now that she had an IUD, besides her brother, the most important thing was her grandmother's health. Grandma, how are you? What did the doctor say? Liu Yuhua's eyes were red, and it looked like she had been crying. Why are you so pitiful? Grandma is fine. Don't worry about her. Think about yourself. Liu Yuhua wiped away her tears and said, Grandma knows that Yuchen bullied you again. Don't worry, Grandma has already taught him a lesson for you. In the next period of time, I will not allow him to come to see you again. You should have a good rest and wait until you are well again. Gu Yuechen will not come to the hospital again. This is great news for Wen Shuyi. Not only can she have a good rest, but she can also go for a checkup secretly. After all, it is a private part, so you still need to pay special attention to it, otherwise if any small accident happens, it will be troublesome. Fortunately, God was fair. Seeing how much suffering she had endured, he did not create any new suffering for her. The IUD thing ended just like that, and Wen Shuyi was in good health. If possible, Wen Shuyi really wanted to live in the hospital for the rest of her life, not because of illness, but to avoid Gu Yuechen. Before Gu Yuechen and Wen Shuyi felt extremely tormented, but now they feel particularly happy. When they returned home that day, Liu Yuhua asked Sister Liu to prepare a table of delicious food. Well, actually there were things about the Gu family that attracted her. At least Sister Liu's cooking skills were good. During this period, Liu Yuhua and Wen Shuyi ate and drank at the same time, and the drug treatment gradually took effect, but it would take some time before the surgery. Liu Yuhua was in much better spirits, so Wen Shuyi felt that she should be able to go back to the crew and no longer have to take care of Liu Yuhua. Of course, Wen Shuyi also knew that if she mentioned this to Gu Yuechen, he would definitely not agree. This matter could only be successful if she first obtained Liu Yuhua's consent and then let her put pressure on Gu Yuechen. Wen Shuyi sat down next to Liu Yuhua and held her hand. Grandma, how do you feel now? Are you still feeling uncomfortable? Liu Yuhua felt full of love from Wen Shuyi. Shuyi, you should ask this question every day. Grandma is well now. Don't worry anymore. Wen Shuyi smiled playfully, I'm just worried about Grandma, is Grandma really okay? Liu Yuhua nodded, it's really fine. Now you let me carry a bucket of water to the second floor without even taking a breath. She follows up on Liu Yuhua's situation every day, so there should be no problem. Wen Shuyi bit her lip and said, since grandma doesn't need my care, I will go back to the crew to work. Sure, go ahead and get busy. You've been locked up at home or in the hospital these days, you must be suffocating, right? Shuyi, don't worry, grandma will definitely exercise actively in the future to get better and not cause any trouble for you. Liu Yuhua said, wishing she could lift weights right now. Wen Shuyi smiled dotingly, Grandma, don't say that. How can it be a hassle? I am willing to take care of you. Ever since she started talking about this, Wen Shuyi didn't dare to look at Gu Yuechen. She could clearly feel that the atmosphere had changed significantly after she brought up this topic. Liu Yuhua couldn't stop smiling. Sometimes, she really felt that Gu Yuechen had no taste. How could he not cherish such a good daughter-in-law? Our Shuyi has such a sweet mouth. After dinner, when Shuyi went upstairs to pack her things and prepare to return to the crew, she had agreed with Gu Yuechen before that she would take care of her grandmother until her condition stabilized, and she did it, so now she could leave. Bang! The object was pushed away forcefully and Gu Yuechen appeared. He stared at Wen Shuyi's back, wishing he could kill her with his eyes. Wen Shuyi forced herself to ignore that look, but her disregard only brought even greater anger from Gu Yuechen. Gu Yuechen snatched the clothes from her hand. He looked at them carefully and laughed sarcastically, TSK, you dress so formally at home, but dress so wildly outside. Is this for Bai Yi? Wen Shuyi looked at the dress. It was just a very simple vest. Sometimes when she wore clothes from the crew, in order to avoid exposing too much, she would wear a vest inside. Sometimes people would tease her for being conservative. Wen Shuyi didn't expect that her conservatism would become unrestrained in front of Gu Yuechen. Mr. Gu has had so many women, but he doesn't even know such a simple thing. Gu Yuechen threw his vest into the suitcase fiercely. Wen Shuyi, who gave you the courage to mock me? Wen Shuyi took the vest, folded it and put it in the suitcase. I'm not mocking you, I'm just talking about the facts. The next second, the entire suitcase was knocked over to the ground by Gu Yuechen, and a loud bang echoed in the room. Speaking of which, Wen Shuyi felt that she had to thank Gu Yuechen, otherwise she would not be able to face these emergencies so calmly. Wen Shuyi picked up the suitcase and continued to pack it, but Gu Yuechen insisted on knocking it over. Gu Yuechen, you promised me that you would let me return to the crew as long as I took good care of my grandma. Do you want to go back on your word? Gu Yuechen smiled, and looked at Wen Shuyi with an attitude of, I'm just being a robe, what can you do to me, is grandma okay? Wen Shuyi held back her breath and said, it's healed now. If you don't believe me, you can go ask the doctor. Gu Yuechen, the most basic thing in life is integrity. I hope you can fulfill your promise. Gu Yuechen was not justified but also confident, what if I don't? Wen Shuyi, don't think I don't know that you are in such a hurry to return to the crew just to meet Bai Yi. How can you be so shameless? You openly use the resources of the Gu family to have an affair with another man.